Welcome everyone to the regularly scheduled Board of Ethics meeting for March 14th, 2016. It's 11:41. So, roll call please.
Ted Carlson.
Here.
Terry Kelly.
Here.
Kathleen King is excused. David Nesbitt.
Here.
Becky Went.
Here.
Also present is Dee Ennis, Deputy Municipal Attorney, Lisa Toussaint, Administrative Hearing Officer, and Lisa Sleusner, Deputy Municipal Clerk. We have a quorum.
All right, I propose fiddling with the agenda a little bit. I was just speaking with Dee and Lisa here. After the consent agenda, we work with the unfinished business. It looks like we should be able to get through that relatively quickly. Then, so that'd be 7, then 8. Or actually, let's do 8 first, because that was the concept, right? So we can discuss the annual report first, that's 8. Then go to 7, which is the unfinished business, and then go to new business at 6. Does anybody have any objection to doing that?
No objection.
Okay.
But could I interject? We have
Of
someone
course.
coming in and amidst this in
Mhm.
5 minutes, and then a couple people coming in at noon.
So we can just break off and meet with them when they get here, if that works
Okay.
for everybody. Okay, good. So it's approved. So, has everybody had a chance to look at the minutes from the previous meeting? And if so, is there a motion to approve? So moved. Second? Any objection? No. Minutes are approved. So the consent agenda. The forms for board review. Let's see, gift exception forms. Oh, let's see, where are we? I didn't have a chance to look at this. Oh. The one
Green,
that's singing? Green? These are just one?
One. Mm-hmm.
Any reason not to send a letter?
Well, it's for a Puzzle Warehouse gift certificate. I can't believe it's not for the kids, although
Mm.
even if it's a supply over 50, what do we say about that? Let's see. I think they do have to still do it through the principal.
Mhm.
Yeah, it says through the PTA Parent Forum and Booster Club. So it's over 50, so it's in
Okay.
excess.
So there.
Okay.
So the letter now means return, right?
That's our standard letter, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because that's too bad. We can't just direct this to the PTA or something, but it's too late, right?
Yeah.
I mean, they've already. It's already been sent by one person. I don't know. Does anybody have any other thoughts?
Well, how's the PTA involved in this one?
No, they're not. That's the
Not,
problem.
Right. It's a
Right,
personal
I mean-
gift from a parent, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we returned some before, and they called me on the phone and said, well, how do we prevent this in the future? And I said, well, here's what the code says. I'm happy to send that to you.
Mhm.
Here's the little letter to put in the newsletter. And anyhow, I told them, it needs to go through the PTA. They said, well, can it go through now? I go, well, yeah, technically it can. I mean, it's going to be anonymous, and you're going to know who it is, but, that's really the way it should proceed.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, if they were to call me,
Yeah, we should. Yeah,
okay.
yeah. Let's do that. That sounds good.
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of silly in this
I
particular
know.
case, but it builds the habit, though. I mean,
It builds the habit,
Next
yeah.
time around, this particular teacher will know. Oh, you know something. You make it sort of like tell parents who are interested to give it to the PTA instead, and I'll make it anonymous
Right.
Mhm.
donation to me. So.
Okay. And let's see what's next. There are no elected gifts, is that right?
No.
Any conflict of interest? Is there one here?
Yes.
Any thoughts? This is, Eric has no influence on the ability of his wife's company. All right, any objection to this? Anybody have any additional thoughts? Hearing none. Then move to approve.
Okay.
Yes?
This one. So what? I'm sorry. What business did they?
Yeah,
do?
let's see. Let's look at this.
Architects.
Architects.
They do like instructor management services and some kinds of, we do a lot of work with them.
Okay.
They do
Ways
school
for
of
purpose.
people. Eric has no influence on the ability of his wife's company to maintain. I assume it's just different departments.
Well, he's on the school
He's on the
board.
school
That's the
board.
thing that worries me about this
Mhm.
one, right?
Yeah, does
So
the
it's-
school board have any role in
Contract.
Consult contracts?
with architects?
I would think that they don't.
I just don't know how it's
I don't
done.
know if that's a thing
I don't think they administer contracts. I don't think they either select or administer contracts. But
Okay.
maybe we need to ask. And of course,
It'd be
Eric's
helpful.
running for assembly as well.
Oh, yeah.
Mhm.
It'd be helpful to know just for our future reference. I just don't know what, if there are contracts of a certain value, do they go to the school board? Or,
Mm.
I mean, here it sounds like he
Mhm.
would remove himself from the process, and that's fine. I don't particularly have an objection to this.
Mhm.
This particular disclosure. I just am curious for edification for future questions of this author.
Okay. Why don't I
Alright.
find that out?
Yeah, can we just make a quick
Just for the
call?
heck of it, yeah.
Are we prepared to approve this one in the meantime? Yeah, anybody have a problem with this one? No? Okay. And,
I'd like
You
to
wanna
stand
pause?
right away.
You want to pause?
Yeah.
oh, let's pause right now? Or how close are we to finishing the consent
Well,
agenda?
President Economic Interest is going to get hairy, and that's going to go right into ONA.
gonna get
and,
hairy?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of it, and we're going to go right into ONA and
Okay.
tweets coming by.
Oh, I see. Okay, all right. Okay, well, let's take a pause now and
I'm going to
yeah,
introduce.
go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah, Dee.
This is Lance Wilbur. He's our Director of Office of Management and Budget. Right? I said that right? Sometimes I say budget and management. So. And anyway, he came to me with a situation as the municipal ethics officer where he when we have items that are going to come onto the assembly, they go through a system called PACE. And PACE is where legal reads them, makes sure the code sites are correct and what they're saying makes any sense. And then it goes through OMB to look at sort of financial things, and the CFO, and then the municipal manager, and then it gets published. Lance has a role. He's one of the signers because he's OMB, and they look at some of the financial aspects. And I'll have Lance explain what he actually looks at. But apparently, an item, and it was a rezone. And maybe Lance, I can let you take over for me. Say what your wife was involved with and what you signed off on.
Okay. Again, I'm the OMB director. My wife works for an architectural firm who is representing a petitioner for a rezone. It just so happened a couple weeks ago, my wife said, I'm going to be at the assembly on April 20th or March 22nd. I said, what for? She said, a rezone. And I went, I saw a rezone. I didn't know she was representing the petitioner for this item that came before me. And so she's acting on behalf of the petitioner as it relates to the rezone. It's already been through planning and zoning. No matter what the assembly does, there's really no financial benefit to my wife or my wife's firm. She's representing them no matter which way the decision goes. So I didn't know about it until I found out she was actually had to go to the assembly for it. And so I came to Dee and I said, I don't know, I just want to be upfront about this, let you know, because I went back through my PACE items and I recognized that I did approve this matter. There was no financial situations that relates to the city. There's no money coming out or going to the petitioner or the municipality. So, but the fact that I do see all of those things, and occasionally, if the municipality is involved in property, then I look at the financials. This particular item doesn't have any financials, but they are required to go through my office. So anyway, I just wanted to let Dee know that. I wasn't quite sure what I want to do. It's going to be up before the assembly next Tuesday night, and I just wanted to let it be known that my wife's going to be in the audience potentially representing. So anyway, that's why I'm here.
Go ahead, Ted.
Did you say the planning and zoning approved it or disapproved it?
Approved it.
They approved it?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, why is it going to assembly?
Because
Has
it's a
to
re-
go to both procedurally has to go to both the planning and zoning
Usually it's
commission and the assembly for rezone.
And I believe I might have some conditions on it.
I realize that, but usually, from planning and zoning, they go in there and it's usually a slam dunk. There's no public testimony.
Whether the assembly will approve
Yeah.
it or not.
So,
Yeah.
So, okay.
Well, they generally are pretty routine,
Mhm.
but it still does have to go to the assembly.
Mhm.
And before things go through the assembly, they go through, again, there's about 5 people, head of departments, I think what Lance too that was saying that was important to me was this really had no financial decisions in it, and but because he's who he is, he has to concur. A lot of things, of course, have financial repercussions, and he may be very involved. But this one didn't happen to have one. That's why I didn't even strike him at the time. So the question is this one does? The question to me is, he's coming here, does he need to do any type of disclosure to the assembly? That doesn't seem appropriate to me. He's not an assembly person at the next meeting. I'm not sure. A remedy would be to invalidate his signature on the PACE. Is there really a conflict in the... So I guess maybe go back to the beginning, is there really a conflict here? Can Lance use his judgment when he knows about his wife's involvement, when he really has substantive input into that matter? It seems like here he doesn't have any substantive input, so maybe the board says, well, there's not a conflict.
Is there somebody else in the office who can also kind
In
of
the
sign
future,
on? Right.
my deputy, my
Yeah.
deputy has the authority to sign in my absence, and in the
Yeah.
event that this comes up, I've noted that here, how I would suggest that, that's how I will handle it in the future, if it comes forward again.
Yeah.
Is that the primary thing that she might appear before the assembly is rezones? I mean, are there other areas that she could pop up, or?
Any development of property,
Mhm.
but if she represent,
Mm.
this is the first time she's ever had to do this,
Mhm.
and so that's why it wasn't on my mind.
And Lance is new this year, too, to this position. He's only 6 to 8 months now.
So I think the relevant, if you take a look at code 15025, right, this is
Yep. Right?
D, yeah, right, I knew there was something about family, but it's the substantial interest,
Yeah, is there anything, if the rezone is like the continued work of the firm contingent on the rezone going through, being able to build the project, or?
I don't know.
Okay.
I mean, I didn't ask. I know that her firm is being paid to represent the property owner for the rezone. I don't know if she's being paid to represent if they're gonna do a development.
Okay.
Is there anybody else in her office that could do this?
That I don't
Should
know.
we
I-
step aside?
I think, I don't know.
It seems to me like this section B sub 1 is operative.
The 025?
Yeah, 115.025B sub 1 about whether or not the financial interest, there is a substantial financial or private interest which would vary based on the outcome. And when.
And so are we thinking we don't have that information if we don't know whether?
yeah, it would be, I guess it would, to apply it, we would need to know if the rezoning, if you had not approved the rezone instead of approving it, how much of a difference would that have made in terms of the financial interest that your wife's company had in this matter?
My action, I wasn't approving the rezone. All I was doing was reviewing the request that would go to the assembly to make sure that it's, if there was anything related to Office of Management and Budget,
Right.
that I had those things. But there's no fund certification on the document. I brought a copy of the document, and there's no money in it, but the process is, in these cases, I do see.
But you could have not approved it.
I could have not approved it.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what would have happened then?
So then it would go back to the originator,
Mhm.
because when I reject it, it goes back to the originator, and then they, find out why I would have rejected it, made an error, and then had at that time, I would have, somebody said why, then it would probably come back to OMB. My deputy could look at it,
Right.
or it would go right over me to the CFO and to the manager and to the attorney.
Okay, so Terry, I think you bring up an interesting point. He's not approving the transaction. He's
Mhm.
approving the paperwork
Mhm.
to get to the assembly to do the approval.
That's right.
Is it like like boxes are checked?
Yes.
Yep.
Right, to make sure all the documents are in order and that, so this is not.
Discretionary element, like you, or to your approval,
Right.
is it
I have
just
a
like have the boxes, have these things been put in the box?
I have two choices. I have approve or reject. And if I reject, I put a reason why. Those are my choices.
But as far as the reason why goes, is it not necessarily to the project itself, but the documents that are submitted
Correct.
in the application form of it?
That's it.
Yeah. And then the substance, like you were saying, I think, substantive matter, that's then dealt with by the planning and zoning and by the assembly. Is that right?
That's right.
Okay. So it sounds like there's less of a financial interest to the extent that this is for like document administration. Is that a
That's
fair
exactly what I'm
characterization?
doing, yeah.
Okay.
This company, does your wife, is she a part owner or is she just employed there?
She's just employed.
Employed. So it has no bearing on
Mm.
her wages, whether
Her salary.
it's approved or disapproved.
She's just employed.
Yeah, okay.
It seems like maybe the operative language then from what we're discussing is the last clause of subsection B of 115.025, that if the employee's duties could influence the official action portion. Because that seems like what we're asking is, could you presumably could your role be the hinge in terms of what happens in this official action?
I can't change the content of the document written by the planning department without, I mean, I can't do that. I can't
And-
rewrite it.
And you can't say yes or no to the project or to the.
No, that's not
right.
my prerogative.
Yeah.
I'm looking for basically the proper format of the document, and if there's any budget issues, that's what I check.
But if you said no to your little component of it, it would kind of go back.
It would go back to
For it
the-
to be corrected, presumably, until you were satisfied with it. So you have some role in this paperwork is important to
Yes.
the official outcome of
Correct.
the.
Well, but it's dotting the i's. It's really, it is
procedural.
administrative, it's dotting the i's.
And it sounds like this went through before you even knew that your wife was
I
involved.
didn't know it until I found out she was going to assembly the same night I was, and I'm like,
Yeah.
why? And then she said, for this, and I'm
Right.
like, huh.
Are you going to the assembly?
Yeah. Yeah, they're gonna talk about a little IT project called SAP, so I'm gonna show up for that.
And at the assembly meeting, Lance would never be questioned about the zoning
Mm.
application, because that's not his world.
Right, yeah. Lance would be there.
Yeah, Chris Shitty would get the question directly.
Do we have any more questions for, I'm sorry, Lance?
Lance Wilbur.
Lance Wilbur. If we don't have any more questions, maybe we can let him go and then we can
Okay.
finish our discussion.
Well, thank you for your time.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thoughts, comments?
I don't think personally that there's any conflict at all.
Mhm.
You know, I mean, it's really an administrative type approval and no bearing on the outcome of the assembly.
Yeah, I do think it's that last clause of B, that if we can determine that his duties couldn't really influence the official action, it sounds like from how he's described them, that they couldn't, that he doesn't have a discretionary decision maker's role where he can say yes or no, this is a good idea to rezone. He's just saying,
Right.
yes, you filed your, I don't know what you're planning.
So the official action, right, so under that scenario, the official action is the approval of the zoning.
The assembly.
It's not whether the documents get signed off
Yeah.
properly or not, right?
Because it sounds like you would think it'd still get the rezone, even if he said
Right.
no, and they went back and said,
They just keep-
okay, we're putting the documents we need in, or
Right.
you made a mistake, the documents are in there,
Right.
then that would be the next step.
Terry? Any thoughts?
Well, I guess I am inclined to think though that it was an official action. I mean, it obviously is an official action regarding a matter in which he had an immediate family member who had some financial interest. So for me, I think it's okay, but I think it's okay for a different reason. I don't think.
Because it isn't a substantial financial.
Yeah, I mean, if she's a
Mhm.
salaried employee, then, what's the downstream effect for her? It's got to vary, the financial interest has to vary directly and substantially with the outcome
Mhm.
of the interest. And it just
Mhm.
doesn't sound like if he had, because there's, one of two things, if he doesn't approve it, it just doesn't sound, again, because the approval is more of this administrative type approval, it just doesn't sound like her being a salaried employee, it doesn't
Mhm.
seem like it's that that you could say now directly and substantially her financial interest has varied.
It depends on, I mean, then I start to sort of unpack this endless box of what it could mean. I think partially because I work sort of in the development industry, where generally if you represent, I mean, I don't know if they're getting this business or not, but generally you get one firm who does your zoning, then they do your project. So presuming the zoning goes through, then maybe they get a whole bunch of work to design this, build this project, and then if they're a small firm, maybe that does have a big impact on what their employees make in the year. I don't know. These are all like unanswered questions, and the answer could be no, 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 no. But
Which is
we don't have that
why I
information.
think the first sentence in B is actually pretty broad, right?
Yeah.
I mean, and notice, and I don't know, but I mean, what's your argument? I read that last clause of the paragraph. I mean, the if. I mean, strictly speaking, the if has to refer to the first part of the
Yeah,
sentence.
true. It
right?
only refers to the disclosure as opposed to the
Right, I mean, the first
non-participation.
sentence in the paragraph is very broad, and you can kind of see why, right? You know, it's a very broad, as a matter of public trust. People working for the city should not be engaged in official actions in which they have themselves or family members have financial interest. And you don't even want to get into, well, maybe it influences me. No, this is about public trust, and so just don't do it. And if it has to get done, then you've got to meet these various disclosure requirements. So I think that is a pretty broad prohibition. And in my view at any rate, if the substantial interest analysis were to check out, it would be problematic.
So maybe we need more information though.
We might need, I'm not so worried. It doesn't seem to me like anything untoward happened here, but I am also worried about, even though we're not bound by precedent, I do want to make sure this gets carved out right, so that cases that are more dodgy don't be like, oh, well, why wasn't it like Lance's case? And I want us to be really clear about, if we think this is okay, why it was okay.
And that's one reason, by the way, I asked him to come to the board with a request for an advisory opinion, because I said this could happen again in the future. Now, I think obviously he will be extremely diligent that it doesn't happen again in the future.
Right. I assume that
but-
what he'll do in the future is have his deputy sign off on anything.
Well, have his
done.
wife disclose what she's doing.
And in fact, maybe in this case,
Communication in the household is like,
maybe in this case, I don't know if it's too late in the process or not, but maybe the deputy can review the application and initial it, right? Or have some sort of independent review. I don't know how that works exactly. But
So it's, I mean, I think that'd be sort of perfunctory. I mean,
Yeah.
we could certainly request that, that the deputy independently review it.
As a remedy in lieu of having him come back to us with a whole bunch of more information and us make a determination about whether or not he can or can't, because this is going to go on the next Tuesday's agenda, right?
Right. I mean,
Yeah, I think maybe that's a way to do it.
right.
Yeah.
And then the concept then is, this is a request for advisory opinion, so I assume he wants us, or we should draft something.
But I
Even
would
if
do
it's
it
short.
prospectively, not so much about this transaction, because then we do have to get into all that information, and I think it's more perspective that in the future, or I think that'd be more helpful, is in the future, to be careful about that. It's interesting to me because I guess I do agree with Terry that his signing is an official action, but it's such an administrative dotting an I.
Well, I think where I get hung up, I agree with you, Terry, that like when I was initially thinking about this last clause, that if the employee's duties influence the official action, I was applying that to the whole paragraph and saying, okay, it's an official action, but his particular scope can't really influence the official action. So, but if it only applies to the first half of that, particular sentence, which just does by its construction, then we're left with the first statement, which is a pretty blanket prohibition on any participation in an official action. I think it's an official action. I just felt like he didn't have a lot of discretionary authority to influence the outcome.
well, to me, it was, but if he'd disqualified it or whatever, denied it or disapproved it, all would have happened, it would have had no bearing on the outcome of what planning and zoning or what the assembly's going to do. All it would have done was sent it back to the people, and they would have corrected whatever was wrong with it and sent it back in, and if approved it, then it would go on. I mean, it would have no bearing whatsoever on the outcome.
So what I'm hearing from you, Ted, is that you're saying that your kind of focus is on the language, what does it mean to participate in an official action?
Right.
And if the participation, if the involvement is of such a nature
Yeah.
that there is no real discretionary involvement, or there is no really ability to influence the outcome,
There's no
ultimate outcome,
ability.
that does
Ability.
not mean participating in a official action.
That's interesting.
Then you don't have to get to the issue of whether or not there was a, the substantial financial and private interest piece.
Do we have any
But-
precedent for this? Like, I mean, I'm thinking of equivalent functions in the municipality,
Right.
like the staff that take in a planning and zoning application, who go through to make sure that they think it meets code before they recommend it, pass it on to or like any kind of other municipal function where it is more or less, anybody in the building department, like, do we have any, have we ever confronted this issue before, or?
And can I say, do you mind if I quickly respond, Lisa? I think that what he did in this case, because there weren't any financial aspects to it, so there wasn't any discretion, and really it's just signing a piece of paper, because if he doesn't, it can't move on to the next
It's
step.
ministerial.
Sometimes he does have that kind of discretion.
Yeah, if there is something. it
There is a
right?
financial, so I'd be careful about saying, it's you'd have to just this particular instance. I mean, Department of Law, we reject these things all the time. That no, you wrong code, or this is wrong, that's wrong. And he does have some decision-making power in this process, in the PACE process. I think, however, because this didn't bring up any financial, then this is a perfunctory one. He just signs off. And it goes through all these 5 departments, so all the different worlds are touched, but each one of them, some of these are perfunctory they're just signing off, because, hey, this doesn't affect us, shoot it on.
So if they're perfunctory, D, does that mean kind of what you're describing, he's not participating in an official, the official
maybe
action is
that's-
approving the rezoning, but is he participating in an official action?
Is the official action the department head reviews of the PACE item, I guess, as a collective whole? Yes, and I see what you're saying. I mean,
Yeah.
he's not really participating, because in this, you can't say that though either.
I
They're on
hear
financial.
what Terry was saying, is that
Mhm.
participating is you have a role in it, you have any type of involvement whatsoever in this process that leads up to an ultimate vote.
Oh, he's signing off on
But-
something, it's hard, it's
Yeah.
just hard to say that's not an official action.
Yeah.
And I would really
Participating.
worry about parsing official
Well,
action.
it's
We've seen
official
all-
action only if it's more discretionary,
Well,
but not, I agree.
We've
with you.
already seen just from the assembly, there's a tendency to sort of say, well, I don't have a substantial, so don't
Right,
worry, I'm not even going
right.
to disclose. There's already
Yeah.
a tendency for people to sort of take this, well, I don't think there's an influence, so therefore it's okay for me to plow on through, even if it seems to violate black letter sections of the
Mhm.
code. And that's why I'm worried about the precedent, I'm not so much worried about this particular case. I mean, it's also worth asking, if we accepted that line of reasoning, should we tell him in the future then that these kind of cases, if it comes up again, should not be handled by his deputy?
No, it should be handled
Should
by
be.
his deputy,
Why?
right? Why not? Oh, I see what you're
Because
saying.
it's not an official action, it's just
Oh, no,
perfunctory
I'm not.
signing off.
I
think no
Like,
matter
in some
what,
sense,
yeah.
in some sense, the remedy for the future, I think, is a suggestion that, let's face it, that it's not the best to have people signing off on business in which their
Especially
wife.
when they could be discretionary, yes.
Right, why even recommend that if there's not at least some recognition that this is not, whether it's a violation of the code or not, clear, this is not the best way to do
Well,
it from the
and-
perspective of,
And
public
we haven't even
trust
discussed it, their appearance of impropriety, which again, in our code is not enough, but there's an element of that. And-
Well, that's right. Or you might read, if you read again that first sentence, why would that first sentence in this section be so broad? I think that is an appearance. It doesn't say appearance, but what's the idea? A city
Maybe
official
the-
should not be participating in official action, and it's not for them to judge is there influence or is there not. Don't do it. It's a blanket prohibition. Why? Because appearances affect public trust.
So maybe the crux of our decision here is, if you read this first sentence, right? The municipal employee shall not participate in an official action in which the member of their family has a substantial financial or private interest. And I would say in this instance, in his particular official action, if we're defining the official action as him saying, yes, like this is fine, go forward, she doesn't have a substantial financial interest in that particular
that
action in this
action.
case, because his action in this case, in this specific case, could not change her financial outcome, but tell him that in the future, because this is a very fine line, that all, I mean, I would say, I agree that if in the future, his deputy should look at things if his wife is attached to them. And I would say
Well-
that's true for anyone else too.
Well, I think he would have done that had he known.
Yeah.
You know,
Well, which again, I think is an indication though that it's dodgy, right? I mean, like there's
Yeah.
something not, this is not, I don't think it's quite what the official, it's not really an official action.
I think
don't
we're
I
looking for a
feel
way
like
around
we're-
to try
I
and let
feel
him
like
not.
I feel like going after the official action is really dangerous.
Mm.
I
I
agree.
feel like where it makes more sense, where there's more discretion, is what does it mean to participate? That to me, I think, is significant. And then what is a substantial financial or private interest? I think an official action, you want to be perceived as carving that definition out in such a way that you've narrowed it so much. That to me, I think, is a little bit funkier. Participate versus and substantial and financial to me feel like more appropriate way to look at this.
Well, and that's why I would prefer to keep that this is, again, my preference is the way professional ethics should get done, but to keep the first sentence, to interpret that as broad. I mean, again, I think there's a public trust issue there, and I think that was written for that reason. In this particular case, I mean, it sounds to me like what you're saying is you don't think B is satisfied, right? That that her financial and private interest would not vary directly and substantially with the outcome of the official action.
Well, it depends on how we define the official action there, because I do think, I don't think her financial or private interest, regardless of what other details that we find out, would vary substantially and directly with what he did specifically.
Right.
It may vary substantially and directly with what happens with the whole thing. Like if the assembly decides it's not a good rezone, they boot the project out and the project doesn't go forward. Who knows? We don't have the details there. That's where we're missing the pieces of whether they're engaged to do the architectural work or the design work for the whole project.
And we're also missing that information because it's not his.
Yeah.
That's not what he's doing.
Yeah.
But that's where I would be willing to read official actions more narrow, that if his official action is the checking off
I agree
on
with
sort
that.
of like these technical
Yeah.
issues, and then, and so what was his official action? Signing this and approving, not the rezoning, but that it can move on to
Right.
the next stage in light of his particular job. And what would have happened if he had not? It would have been kicked back, but at some point,
It'd get
it
through.
would have come back to him, right? And it sounds like at some point, he said it would go to his deputy eventually or something, and so, so in other words, the entire rezone wasn't entirely up to him. To me, that's still an official action involving something in his wife, so I don't think it's excluded for that reason, but B says it's gotta be there really, before we count that as, it's gotta be that there's significant and direct outcome differences based on what he would have done.
I agree with that analysis.
They're all, I mean, there's multiple different ways to analyze them, they're all really interesting.
Yeah, I think this is a
Oh.
challenging one because I feel like we essentially want to give him a pass here because we don't think he in particular acted with impropriety, but we'd rather in the future have everyone else follow the hard line of not looking at things that their spouses are bringing up forward.
But I think it is fair, though, not to put the whole project on his shoulders.
Yeah.
I mean, because I don't
No, I
think that's
agree.
an
It's not
accurate
on
way of
his
looking at it.
shoulders. Yeah.
So, in a way, it's not that of a squirrely reading or some sort of particular reading. I think the one, Becky, you mentioned is the most accurate. His official action is limited. Therefore, our analysis of whether it's substantial financial interest should also be limited. Especially here, because it would, I mean, this is an administrative type of a review that eventually they get it. I mean, isn't that what architects do? They want to make sure that the documents are all in order, so you hire an architect to make sure it gets through this administrative process and gets through to the assembly and the planning zone. So, I propose, do we have any more debate on this? I propose let's see. So.
Well, can I say that Lisa
Yeah.
sort of brought up the idea of limited participation in the official
Yeah.
action. Does that make any sense, Terry, or it's either official action or it's not?
It's really weird.
Well,
yeah.
I guess because my feeling is that the official action is what he did. So
Signing
it's
off.
his purview, his particular angle of review. In this case, it seems like it's mostly just technical and dotting I's and stuff like that. But he reviews, he signs, thus moving it on to the next process. In which case, he participates 100% in that process. That's
Okay.
his official action. I don't see the official action as approving the rezone, right? I mean, approving of the rezone in my mind is something that happens because of numerous official actions that get along the way, and maybe there's a final assembly approval, that might be the big one.
So I would say maybe his participation in the overall approval of the project is not a participation, but under the analysis that I propose we go through, he's 100%. That's his entire.
Okay.
He's participating 100% in his decision.
Because I think that's where the hinge is then if we're looking at 1 sub B, whether the financial or private interest varies directly and substantially with the outcome of the official action. And his official action is approve
Right.
to proceed or deny for lack of appropriate information. And there, we're determining that there isn't a substantial change in her financial or private interest based on what he could or could not do
Mhm.
in this case.
So there's the hook.
I still recommend that he get his deputy to sign that next
Yeah,
time.
for
It's
good
gotta
order,
be
for the
pretty
appearance of
prudent.
propriety.
Right.
Yeah.
Ethically prudent.
Yeah.
Does that sound reasonable? How, is it? Do you agree, Ted?
Well, yeah, I mean,
Okay.
yeah, because if we, the opinion he's asking for, and if we say no, it's definitely a conflict of interest,
Yeah.
you know, I mean, that's
Yeah.
like pulling the tires off his car, you know?
Right.
And it's gonna derail the whole thing.
Yeah.
For something that I feel he had no control, had no control over the actual outcome.
Right.
So,
I yeah.
I think we should go forward.
Okay. It just occurred
Do
to
we
me.
need a
to-
motion on that?
I was thinking the same thing. He didn't check off one. Do we, does
He
anyone know if this
didn't.
was confidential?
He didn't waive, and I was gonna ask you all if I need to put this whole
We did not.
discussion in executive session.
I'm gonna, I'll request that he waive it.
That he waive it.
Yeah, he will do that.
Okay. All right. Good. Because it just occurred to me we're not doing any of this.
Yeah,
under-
no, he'll waive it.
Okay. All right. So I propose someone draft this. Doesn't have to be long, but just someone draft an advisory opinion in accordance with our discussion here. Who is prepared to do that?
Yeah, of course they need it before.
Well,
It has to be done this week.
No, I don't think
Yeah,
so,
I think
because
the
Dee
board
can-
say-
Yeah, we
Dee
can communicate.
can communicate the result. I mean,
Mhm,
what we've
mhm.
discussed here, and then we can have for next month's
Yeah,
a draft
okay.
for next month's review.
Yeah, I'll write something.
Will you write
Yeah.
something? Because okay. So Terry will then write something.
Yeah, and just so that it doesn't reflect that, this is where we're always gonna rule. You
Right.
know, it depends on, circumstances.
Okay.
sort of thing.
So-
Just, it's not a,
Do we need a specific motion then to draft an advisory opinion in accordance with our discussion?
It is so moved.
So moved.
yeah.
Second?
Second.
Okay. And then also, we can communicate with him informally for now,
Okay.
for next week's
Mm-hmm.
assembly meeting.
And do you want an independent review by the deputy?
I don't know, what do you guys
No,
think about
It's
that?
pretty perfunctory. I mean, it's not.
I think if this is our decision in this instance, then we're saying he doesn't need it.
Right.
Because there was no substantial financial outcome.
That it's more
associated with
discretionary
this
the next
action.
time, yeah.
But in the future, that it should be consistent and not
Yeah.
confront a problem with an issue where he may have more discretion. He should deputize.
That's a good point. Yeah, that's a good point. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, that sounds reasonable. Okay.
And I have, waiting is the.
Yes.
One of Therese Williams, who does the,
Okay.
all the LRSA boards.
And so does this go to 4B on our,
What does it say?
This goes to disclosures of present economic interest.
This is that whole discussion.
4AB.
4B?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, sorry.
The whole discussion, and I would get the 8th floor staff person who does it. Teresa does all the boards, service boards, and getting new members to fill out their forms.
Okay.
And Ona is new this year, and she does all the ones for the boards and commissions and discuss, what their process is. And there were some interesting things with the service boards because a lot of them are retired people, and we couldn't get them in the wintertime, even though they were
Mhm.
appointed in the wintertime.
They're snowbirds.
So
uh,
one of them's waiting out there, and I can grab the other one.
Okay, so, and then she'll just give us an update? Or what?
Well, I didn't ask them to make a presentation. Let's ask them. Maybe I can walk you
Sure,
through some
let's,
questions.
well, I'll let you
'cause I
lead
don't
that.
want them
Okay,
to,
all right, Ms. Williams? Okay. So are you helping me keep track of this, what we've accomplished and what we haven't?
Yes.
Okay.
But I think it was more, we got the new administration and we need somebody on board trying to get compliance.
Mhm.
You remember how Stephanie Wainwright was
Mhm.
helping us before? Well, we got 200 and something disclosures from her, from her efforts out of 700. But now this year we have maybe 20 or 30.
Oh, that's all. So what we
And
need
so
to do
the- it's-
essentially is get this back on board.
Get it back on
Okay.
board.
All right.
And then I guess the problem I have with Therese is, she didn't get 100%. She's probably at 15% maybe of her LRSA boards.
Oh.
But she didn't file them with the clerk's office. So if they're sitting over there on her desk, that doesn't, it's not filed.
Oh, I see.
So
Okay.
really she got 0% because none of them were filed with the clerk.
Okay. So we're educating her to that.
So in other words, you all didn't get to review any of them.
Yeah.
So, and I put both of their reports. My report is in there, and then the municipal report is in there, and then LRSA.
Okay.
So you can see where they're at for this year.
And I'm going to just walk you through it a little bit. I don't expect you to do a presentation unless you want to give one.
Oh,
Yeah.
no, that's okay.
Yeah, we were told you have a PowerPoint to show
Yeah.
us.
Yeah, that's right. Let me run downstairs. I forgot it.
We get wait for Ona when Ona's coming in.
Thanks.
Let me give these to them too. If you guys want to go past your present economic interest towards the, after your last present economic interest, you'll see my compliance report, and you'll see what I put together for the mayor's office, and then you'll see Teresa's Excel spreadsheet. That right now just shows what was gotten for 2016, where we're at in 2016. And I just reproduced the spreadsheet for them, please.
Oh, thank you.
And then, this was the old form that was being used for the compliance report.
Okay.
And any of the ones that have come in from the mayor's office,
Uh-huh.
boards and commissions, I have them checked off on there. So
Great.
it shows kind of where you're at, even though, perfect. Even though it's not accurate as to the membership because I don't have that information.
Okay.
Probably a lot of that has changed.
So, can you send this to me in a format with which I can have Felix update all the?
Yes, definitely.
Okay.
That was the one thing that I was going to ask you about because that I hadn't received them, so they weren't officially filed.
Right.
And so now I
Yeah,
have them.
now
Thank
you
you.
have them. And then I just kept the copies set.
Okay.
Well, let me introduce you all. This is Therese Williams, and she's been here for a million years. If you want to introduce yourself, feel free to, but she's been here forever and is the staffer for many of the LRSA boards
Uh-huh.
and any other boards. Are you all do road service, all those boards?
We administer all the road service areas, all the boards and all the contractors.
And I'll ask you a couple questions in 2 seconds. And then Ona Browse is new this year.
Hello. I'm happy to have appointed some of you.
Yes.
Oh, she's wielding power.
Yeah, I know.
Wow. And brand new, and so what we wanted to familiarize her with the process here as well. One of the things that has come up in the past, Ona, is that we found that a member of a LRSA board, he was an elected official, his wife was the contractor for that board.
Yep.
And a direct conflict, and then he even asked for more money to pay her more, and we found out about it at the last minute, and finally did one of the board's first aggressive actions was to recommend that he be decertified. And problem is he was the major. His wife is the major contractor for all the hillside, and it was a snowy winter, and so anyway. But what we discovered, so there were some real things we had to consider. What we discovered in that process, however, was that many of the boards and commission people were not filling out their initial disclosure forms. And he's an elected official, so was he filling out an APOC thing? Was someone at the clerk's office? Hey, you know what, whether they're elected officials or not, and I don't know if the new ordinance went in, whether they're going to be elected or appointed or how that works.
It did. They filed for the board seats. Then 5 days prior to the election, the write-ins can file. So they took the motion off where they won't have write-ins at the election days.
Okay, but there's still, some of them will still be elected and some of them are appointed.
Correct.
Okay, so we still have to deal with that. Because see, the elected, the disclosure requirements for elected officials are different than the employees. But at any rate, but Therese is there to solve that whole problem anyway. And so we had asked her last year if she would start making sure that the different road service boards got these disclosure forms right up front. And how do you do that? Are you a staffer, or how do you affect this process?
I have direct contact with all the board members, so I send an electronic form out to all board members who are elected first. And then the second round, I'll send out to all the appointed.
And there was some issue about when, I think we wanted to, or in the code, maybe there's a deadline within 30 days or something of being appointed. But that you had some problems with some of the elderly, retired people following up, trying to get a hold of them. They were out of Alaska.
Right. It's a big issue because a lot of them are snowbirds and they volunteer. And we're having a harder time nowadays getting the younger people to jump on board to serve the boards, but it's constant trying to get a hold of them.
And they don't meet over the summertime because they meet beginning of fall to decide. It's mostly road service, right? Or oftentimes they don't, but the big
Correct.
season is.
Yeah. And so we tried several times to do a September email. We've done a November. I did November this year and then another one in January. I got more responses in January. I believe we tried it in April one time too, right after the election. It's just getting people to respond.
So how do you think that's going at this point?
They're better now. They're a lot better. For some reason, it's kicking in, maybe because it's been going on for 2 or 3 years now.
And you don't personally go to the LRSA board meetings?
No.
Or any of that? See, with other boards, we have staff. A lot of them have staff.
Yeah. I have daily contact with all of them, and they know we're their administrator, and so I'm in constant contact with them.
So, and I haven't reviewed this. Is it pretty, what type of percentage are we at?
Oh, on the list of people who returned this year?
For her,
Oh,
for her
nurses.
stuff.
I'd say, I didn't do a percentage thing. Probably 65-70% of them this time.
Yeah. And I think it's a good process, but I think this process won't catch the people like that we had to deal with that one time.
So what happens if people don't
Well,
complete one?
and that's what, we don't have a remedy, I don't think, at this point. I'm not even sure we have one in code. Now, the ethics board has broad sort of discretionary powers and ability to educate, but I don't think there is a set remedy in here for failure to disclose. And again, Ona, the other problem with that for Therese was timelines.
Yeah.
That if we couldn't do it in January, I think your group should be a lot easier to do because, if you don't mind if I switch over to you, Ona, are most of the boards and commissions that you staff or that you do the appointments for, are they do they almost all have staff? So the staffers can do it pretty easily at the first meeting.
Ideally, yes.
Uh-huh.
I would hope that they would. I think that if we, I would like to think that if they do it at the first meeting when people come in, or they have a timeline of 30 days with an appointment or whatever
Mhm.
the circumstances may be, that would work. But there's not a date, an annual
I'm
date
looking
by
for
which you
that.
have to have all of them in, or there is?
Every year of their term, they have to have one in by the 15th of February. So
Okay.
it's an annual disclosure.
Right.
It
And
says-
that's what it says on the form.
Yeah, and it's, just so everybody knows, it's 1.15.030 H, disclosure of present economic interest within 30 days, and this is appointed people, within 30 days of appointment, a member of the public appointed to serve on a public body shall file with the municipal clerk written statement, blah, 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 blah. Let's see if it has any response. I'm looking, I don't see any deadline though. So therein lies one problem, we don't have much of a deadline.
Well, I mean, there's the 15th of February deadline.
And where is that, just on our
It's not.
form?
It's in the form section. I'm gonna go look it up. No, it's in code. Let's see, appointed. It is in 1.15040B, and it's when to file within 30 days after coming within the scope of this chapter and by February 15th of each year thereafter.
Okay. Yeah.
So I think what we can do is, we can do a little education to staff, of all of the boards and commissions, reminding them of the deadline and how it is a month past that deadline. And, then ask them to get everyone to fill them out as the first order of business at the next, regular commission meeting. Or at least hand them out and say that they have to return them, something along those lines. Because this list doesn't look very deep with completions.
Yeah.
You know, I was doing
Yeah.
a training just last week at Board of Equalization, and the staffer handed them out and said, you can't leave this room until we have them back.
That's the advantage of having a staff.
But most of them have staffers in.
Most of
That's,
them do.
yeah, that's nice.
Well, I got a lot of success, including the form on my email and saying send them to the clerk's office, and in this case, it would just be send them to me,
Mhm.
you know, or they could send them to you, and you could send them on to me, whichever way you want to do.
I
But
think I feel like sending them to me is just another step in the chain that doesn't necessarily need to occur. They might think it's a little better if it's going directly to the clerk's office where the reporting takes place.
But does your staffer need to know if they're coming in? I mean, if the staffer is going to be the person, I can see that you shouldn't be involved necessarily.
I'm assuming that the staffer will know that it's coming in. That-
And I'm keeping track of this in this whatever form this is, and I can use whatever form you have. I'm keeping track of this, which I could then forward back to you, so that you can get a quick glimpse of where we are in terms of people who have filed with our
Yeah, we can
office.
just drop it on a shared drive and so that anybody can look at it whenever
Mhm.
they want. But
Yeah.
you can have it as locked so that nobody else can change it.
Okay.
So the staffers would be told to look at that. I mean, someone's got to sort of watch this. I mean, the staffers are the ones that have the ability to make people sign. So I guess my concern is because of what happened in that case is someone sends this form into you. Yes, it does get put on a shared website, but does that staffer? Well, I guess it's just someone's got to take responsibility to review that they're coming in, and I guess that would be you, Ona, or the staffers.
Yeah, that
For
they're
your
coming
group,
in.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's the staff position to make sure that all of those board seats are in compliance. The question is if they're not in compliance, which if there's not a remedy for that, then what do we do? If they just keep refusing to fill one out, you know, do we remove them?
Well, maybe we put a remedy in, and maybe this is the time to deal with the assembly not wanting to, who refuses to fill these forms out because code just says I have to do APOC forms.
Mhm.
And APOC forms are totally unhelpful to this board. Is that might be in it. Lisa and I have some new news on the ethics code rewrite that might affect this issue. We do. And you know, that might be a simple code rewrite. It's just that we do put in a remedy. But having said that, what would that be? Do we
Yeah,
really
it's
want to kick
hard.
people, volunteers off these
I know.
boards?
But you gotta
Required.
have it.
Yes.
I mean, it's not like it's discretionary. I mean, is there any other alternative way of handling this other than signing a document? They gotta get their signature.
Yeah.
And
I think onus boards and commissions, they want to be on these
Right.
boards,
Right.
and they're.
Right.
I think a lot of Teresa's.
Right.
You're like begging for someone to be on that
Right.
road service board, and
Mhm.
it's like I dare you to kick me off.
Right.
Yes,
So
because
it's
they're
a-
elected officials.
Mhm.
Yeah, but you got to have it just because of what happened at Glen Alps.
Yeah,
Mhm.
you know?
exactly.
That can't be going on out there.
Well, now I can do my list and go down and
Okay.
do another mailer to remind the ones that didn't.
And target specifically those people.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Okay.
Target them, give them 30
Sounds
days.
good.
Yeah. No, that sounds good.
But anyway, we really appreciate all the work you're doing. We know,
Yeah.
6 years ago they said this is too much. We won't do it.
Mhm.
And I mean that was the attitude 6 years ago. That it was just too much work. We don't have the time to staff it. That person had too much to do, and so we really appreciate that you're doing this.
It is a lot of work. I think that
Mhm.
I think some people may think that it's not, oh, you just do whatever. It's surprising how much work.
How
it
many
takes.
boards and commissions, for instance, do you have?
There's
40?
40
Wow.
some odd. And we find new ones almost every day.
Right.
Somebody in finance will send us an email like, oh, we have a seat on this board, but we don't know about that one. Where did it come from? So there's a lot. And it's difficult to get people either who are compliant with the requirements for the seats, because there's a lot of seats that, you know, you have to be an engineer, or you have to be within a service area, or you have to have a background in X, Y, or Z. Finding people who want to participate, who have those skills is difficult to do. So, but we're, you know, really trying to sort of do our best to make all the boards whole so that they can do the work that they need to do. So
I do like when the staffers do it at the first meeting. We did that here as well, that it just seems administrative the first meeting anyway. You're doing
Right.
training and maybe some ethics, and here, fill out this piece of paper that no one thinks anything of it. I mean, they're just like, oh, okay, fine. And so that, I think that really works in your situation.
yeah, absolutely. And I think if there's something to be said for, I think some of the commissions have longstanding staff who know that it's a requirement. Some maybe new staffers who don't know that it's a requirement. So going through, and because we now have contact with all of those staff people and have had contact with them over the last 8 months, going over it with them, saying, okay, these are the rules, this is what has to happen, you need to make sure that this happens from here on out. I think that reminding them of that will help a lot.
And just so you know, I think a dream of the ethics board is that we will do an ethics presentation, and the fire department will film it for us, and we can give it to the boards for their first meeting every year.
That's
Because
great.
there's just no way that we can go to 40
Right.
boards. And we only go there when there's a problem. So I'm still hopeful.
So nobody wants to see you.
Well, we go after the fact. We do training, remedial training.
Well, I have some bartering leverage here that they're all gonna be wanting their summer work budgets, so for the 23, I can go, well, I'll
Yeah, you
release
have to
that
have
once I
complete-
get all the completed forms.
That's perfect.
That's actually
Perfect.
that's
Perfect.
That's really smart.
We love leverage.
Yeah, no, that's good.
I know how they operate.
But again, I really want to thank you because it
Yes,
was a
thank you
ton of
very much
work.
for
And
that.
again, the prior person that was in, well, 2 people before you just said, no, I won't do it. It's too much work. And we were left with that. No.
I don't think anybody in our office is allowed to say that.
Yeah.
I got a question. Why don't you represent the road board in Eagle River Tuesday?
They are a commission, boards and commissions.
Yeah.
They fill out an application versus the road service areas that are elected officials.
Well,
But they're also appointed by the community councils.
No,
Yes.
they're elected by.
Right.
Yeah.
And then so those come forward to us, and then we.
Yeah, then you,
Put
the
them on.
mayor has approved it.
Mhm.
It goes to the assembly.
Right.
Yeah, but it's not listed in any of the boards or anything.
It's listed online on my list. It's not. I don't know if it's on this one.
It's not in there. That's so
Subversa,
incomplete.
well, we call it Subversa.
Yeah.
They have the boards and commissions. They fall under Public Works Administration directly, and I believe that they have their own web page out
Mhm.
there, and it's on the street,
Yeah.
Eagle River page, I think. I'll have to find out.
All
I
right.
can't speak for them.
Thank you very much
Yeah,
for coming.
thank you so much.
We
for
appreciate
your work on
it.
this. This is great.
And
And you're here at
too.
lunch. Please take lunch
Oh,
or
yeah.
eat lunch.
Yeah, take
or
a sandwich.
We have a
You
little bit of
can-
leverage too.
You can stay in and visit our meetings, please.
You're actually really lucky that you're a clerk's office board because, you know, unless you're AWU, people don't get fed anymore.
Alrighty, well, thank you for the sandwich offer, but I'm gonna run.
Okay,
Have a good day.
thank you.
And if any of you need anything from me, go ahead and stop by. I'm around the corner this way.
Okay.
That knows where I am.
Great, thanks a lot.
It was nice to meet
All
all
right.
of you.
Oh, and speaking of which, I have,
Oh, yeah,
Terry,
I
I
saw
don't have your
Becky.
disclosure, and Becky, I don't have your disclosure.
Oh, yeah, I just filled out the 250 number.
Okay.
Okay.
It's good.
Well, to
So
follow
probably
up
now
on
for
one,
decision.
one item in the same, this here. Who is it? Harlow Robinson, construction, right? And he's checked both boxes. I neither item I found in there.
I'm sorry, you're looking at the applications here?
Yeah, and then he's
Okay.
also checked that he does have an economic. There's nothing listed in that.
Okay, this is the present economic interest, orange, and then now we're going through them,
Yeah.
right?
And
Okay,
That's the only one that I had a question on.
let me catch up to you. What was the person's name?
Uh,
Carlo?
Carl Robinson.
Carl?
You want to just go through them and get there when we get there?
Yeah.
And I was just noting, I didn't know if you had moved the opinion that was
No.
written by Lisa up or not. It doesn't matter.
No,
at this
we were
point.
going to get through the consent.
okay.
And then move into her opinion.
Okay.
That was my plan. Let's see. Who's this? This is kind of, can't read that.
I think everyone's in a different place in the book, so I don't know.
Did you see this one?
Yes, I did.
I'm looking at this one and I can't read. Oh, is that
Valerie
Mike?
Mike Mills, because
Yeah.
he's the only person to make it.
Oh, it's Mike Mills.
Yeah, I recognize that now.
Yeah.
There we go.
And what board is he on? The Anchorage Community Development?
ACDA.
Development.
That's a separate authority.
Yeah, I had a question about that one as well. Just, I
Mhm.
sort of just initially read it and then thought back through.
But then that was the only one I had a question on.
Oh, yeah, right.
So when we get there, make sure you stop us. Are we just gonna call out like, or are we gonna do
Well, so
one
do
by
we want to
one?
go to the beginning of that section? Is that what you're suggesting?
Yeah, I feel like I think we're
Well,
Sounds good, yeah.
yeah,
just
okay.
go approve, or whatever.
Right, okay. All right, so, Mr. Dyson,
Yeah.
Mr. Murphy, Ms. Freeman,
Yeah, could someone tell me about this one a little bit?
Neighborhoods Alaska, spouse Jim Kenzie,
They were.
Mike Abbott. Grant writing for his employer.
You know,
What's-
it's, I don't know, unfortunately, I didn't review this ahead of time, but she might be someone worthwhile to call in and just ask her a few questions, or you could assign me to go do it.
Mhm.
Because she's head of DHHS, and I think she used to be the head of Rural Cap or something, and it sounds like her husband's involved in it as well.
Mhm.
Neighborhood Works Alaska.
Could you contact her
Yeah.
and just find out some more information?
Okay, why don't I do that?
Unless,
Okay.
unless
I
somebody
can-
else has a better idea.
I think I'd like to learn more
I
about
can't
it just
quite
because
figure this
she's-
out, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so DHHS administers the HUD funds for,
Yes.
And it sounds
Okay.
like he may be involved in grant writing for his employer, so it sounds like that might overlap a little bit.
well, yeah, it sounds like he's the development director for NeighborWorks.
Yeah.
He's applying to DHHS for fund administration
Mhm.
of HUD funds.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Right, okay.
Okay.
Let's ask her.
Okay.
Okay, so we're gonna find out more before we approve that, is that the
Yes.
concept? Okay, so we'll hold off on that one, Lisa.
Okay.
Mr. Morris? Abstain from participating in voting when potential conflict arises. They all say this.
What is it?
And I think,
What is
Possible
this?
conflicts in rural cap and DHHS?
Yeah, what does that mean?
I don't know enough about what.
you know, maybe we should have both of them come, and I think that Steve Morris has talked to me in the past, and we worked through whether we thought that was a conflict. But
Mhm.
part of the problem is that it's strategic for the MOA to have people
Right.
on these
Yeah,
boards.
Right. Mhm.
And so, one of the past directors of DHHS just wouldn't do it at all, just said, oh, I'm not going to take it, you know, but it really was important. And sometimes there's a representative MOA is supposed to be on the board, it's a designated position. So maybe if we had the two of them come in, or I could talk to both of them, but if people are interested in that, I mean, they do handle millions of dollars of grant funding.
But, and
And this is,
they're both the director and the deputy director.
and Ms.
They're the
Freeman,
ones involved.
right, Ms. Freeman signed off on Mr.
Yeah.
Morris.
And
Not that that's a
deputy
problem
director,
necessarily, but it just,
director.
And I'm not sure whether we've seen the one from Steve before, and I talked for 5
Mhm.
minutes, but again, I don't think it would hurt to have them come and explain the relationship
Okay.
a little bit.
Yeah,
So maybe
'cause
I'll
I
just
don't-
invite him to the next meeting.
okay.
Um,
Good, so we'll hold off on those two. Mr. Henry. Is this all right with everybody? checking files.
So he has 2 contracts with us.
Mm-hmm.
Does ACDA control, doesn't ACDA only control the parking contracts?
Yeah, well, that's
Mhm.
their primary thing. They control parking.
So they wouldn't have
But
any
then they
control
also
over-
do housing they're trying to get into
Oh.
the housing world, but neither of these would involve that.
That would be
Okay.
only if they were considering a new, like, RFP for this kind
Mhm.
of service, whether, okay, then I have no idea.
Okay, all right. Radha? Another Mahoney. Mr. Mills. Did we talk about him already? I remember we approved him last time, if I remember.
So Dorsey has a contract with the Muni generally, not with ACDA, right? Is that
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Hmm.
And I'm not even sure what that contract is, but it sounds like we might have one.
Private partnership opportunities. As long as it's not, I mean, I think as long as he falls in the same boat with
Mhm.
Mr. Henry in terms of it being a contract with the Muni and not something that's
But not with
specifically
this
in
department.
ACDA.
Right.
And he's someone who's been keenly aware of this issue and has
Yeah.
discussed it with other board members.
Okay, all right. Mr. Parks?
Do you want to? Do
Oh.
we want to send Mr. Mills at least the standard letter
Mm.
because not voting is not enough. He's also not
Mhm.
allowed to. He's not allowed to deliberate. or
Okay.
participate, So it's a little bit broader. The
Sure.
preventative measure has to be broader.
Yeah, okay.
And that would be good because I don't know if he was the chair or is the chair, but he takes a leadership role over there.
Okay.
And that way he would also.
He's the chair of it.
Is he the chair?
Yeah.
He would
Okay.
communicate that to the other members as well.
You know,
Okay. Mr. Parks?
I feel like this must be an error. ACDA has no interaction with ACDA.
Yeah.
Oh, the ACES it must be.
You know, in my
He says-
business, we call that a violation of law of non-contradiction.
Right.
Oh, maybe it's SMG.
that's,
Okay, but it sounds like,
Contract.
the contract is
I
in
think
the
one
same
of-
category as the Mills contract and the Henry contract.
Well,
not with
SMG
ACDA.
runs all our
yeah,
Denina and
right.
Oh,
Sullivan
Sullivan.
and Egan
Yeah.
and
Oh.
And both
Okay.
the- all of
so
it.
Sullivan Aces.
So does ACDA have any any
No,
role with
absolutely no
SMG?
oversight over that.
Okay.
Hmm.
Then
Okay.
I have to-
All right.
They have oversight over the parking garages.
Patrick Emily. Neither. Mr. Harris. I assume this
This is a different one.
is a different one?
You just sent this one down, D.
I do.
Or maybe you didn't. I was in my
Oh.
mailbox when I got back, but it's a different. It's not the same one we got when we did the advisory opinion.
Hmm.
Huh.
You know-
CFO.
Yeah, we.
Yeah, I don't
And the
know.
letter on the back's from August.
And this, yeah, I think this is what he
Mhm.
wanted to do initially, and then this one we converted into the advisory opinion.
Right.
This is the conversion, then, isn't
Yeah.
it?
Okay. Yeah. All right. So we're
What is
okay
that
with that.
here?
And I do need to get that opinion out to him because there's that.
Yeah. You have it here for me
I
to
have
sign
it here
today.
to sign, yeah.
Okay. So Mr. Robinson. Now we're at Mr. Robinson.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
he has
needs to make up
both.
his mind, I guess.
Yeah. But he doesn't list anything.
There's another. What in my business
Oh,
we
it's
call violation
Parks
of
and
law of
Rec.
For
contradiction.
clarification. I don't
Yeah,
think
can we
it's
just-
business, I don't remember what his wife does.
Can we
You know?
contact
Do you
him?
mind
and
doing that?
Just,
No, I got it.
Yeah,
just
I got it.
follow up and find out what does it mean.
Okay.
So we'll hold
She's
off on
also
that
a
one.
runner.
She is too.
I don't know what she does for a living.
All right, Rick Mystrom.
Yeah.
Neither. Miss Hudson. I don't see anything there. And Mr. Wolf. Mr. Strike.
So for
Yes.
Hudson, they only file these if they have a some sort of interaction. The fact that she didn't fill out anything should cause an alarm because then
Oh.
she shouldn't be filling out a form if she doesn't actually have something. So should I send that back for clarification?
Yeah, that
Yes.
one sounds like one for clarification.
Okay.
Well, the next one too, then, right?
Maybe
Is somebody getting the word like,
Yeah.
you guys need to
As I
do
said,
this?
these are both health and human
They're
services.
They're
That's
overly
right.
compliant.
So they're
Okay.
probably
This is
just.
breathing down our necks. Fill
Can you,
everything.
Lisa, would you just double check, but I bet you that's
But I'm not
there.
soliciting.
Okay,
for it.
that
I don't
it's,
care.
they just thought they had to do it.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
But we need to figure out,
Okay.
we need to figure out who's giving them the bad information. 'Cause
Okay.
I don't know if
Okay.
it's a
Every form
staffer
of the
or a
clerk's
health
like,
and human
wait,
services.
Okay.
Okay.
Also applying
So-
for an administrative variance.
The rest of them are neithers, I believe. And so, in accordance with what we've just decided, does everything look okay for you guys?
Yeah.
All right. So then, is that the end of our consent agenda?
No, we got one thing under the yellow.
No.
We have 3 notices of intent to respond to public
Oh.
solicitation.
We have. Did you say 3 of them?
3 of them.
All right. Oh. Cornerstone.
The second one is the same issue.
So are we looking at the first one?
Oh. Yeah. Okay. So the first one, Mr.
It looks like his wife is
Oh.
a teacher,
Miss
a
Court?
student nutrition.
And he wants to provide construction services. That seems like not interesting.
It doesn't sound like she has
Nope.
any at all influence on whether he gets the contract. And then the second one is that the same Eric Croft?
Yep.
He's running for assembly now.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I just have
Let
the
me
same
take this one.
background question on this one.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So I'll take
If
that.
there's ever an instance where the
Right.
school board.
So you're gonna handle that?
Yeah.
Okay. And so then we're, let's see, Miss Gardner, is that right?
Yeah.
Let's see.
Now, I have a slight problem with her.
Okay.
You know, and she works in that area.
But I have no involvement with assessment of property.
No, but she knows when the list is coming out and what is, you know, ahead of time and this sort of thing. Does that give her an advantage, you know, when she wants to bid on some property?
And we've been through this before for
Mhm.
different people, and so I think we have some opinions on it. And so maybe you could delegate me to find those
Okay.
opinions, number one. And we've allowed
Mhm.
real estates, like the head of real estate services, I think Tammy Oswald or her daughter or someone, if they did a whole bunch of protective things. So why don't I try
Okay.
to find those opinions?
Okay. All right. Okay, so we're holding on that one then.
See, I'm
too.
being good about this because I have other people writing the opinions. I'm ever so happy to do this administrative work.
Okay, so in accordance with those things we've discussed, can we approve the motion to approve the consent
There's
agenda?
two-
Yes.
I think 2 we need, and one is a reference at liberty tax deal, and the other is fire department.
But they're not consented.
That's not the consent agenda?
No.
Yeah.
No, I just want to get
Before we
the,
close, I mean.
yeah, you're leaving soon, aren't you? I want to get the
Yes,
consent
okay.
agenda through,
Yeah,
if that's
the
possible.
consent agenda.
Motion to approve the consent agenda in accordance with what we've discussed. Second? Okay, so consent agenda is approved. Now what we were going to do is actually move to 8. Did you want to?
Well, you know, that's the opinion regarding Jillian Inglis, the person who, the current employee in the ER who used to work in planning and zoning and wants to do private consulting work. The one we had last time for private consulting work. And so Lisa wrote a draft opinion, and whether we wanted to quick look at that or discuss these other two things, because both of you two need to leave.
I'll be
Well-
gone for about 10 minutes at 1 o'clock.
Well, I think that Joanne is well aware of where the board was going on that, so I'm not sure she
Okay.
needs immediate advice, that she could do the consulting services, but pay attention to that other code
Yeah.
section. I could tell her that, and then we'll have a formal opinion, do it afterwards.
Sure.
And if you want to go to those other two new ones, it's up
Sure.
to how the board wants it. The Liberty tax I need to do, though, because
Yeah.
the season is there by the season
No,
will be
let me,
over.
let me just get through 8 first, because 8 should
Okay.
only take 2 minutes, if
Okay.
that. 8 was the annual report, and this is on our agenda because we want to make sure somebody goes to the assembly.
Yes, it's, you have a copy of what it looks
Yes.
like, and you can take your copy if you want.
Mhm.
It is an informational memorandum that's on the agenda for this next meeting, which would be March 22nd.
Mhm.
David's going to go.
Mhm.
Ernie's going to pull the report so that it's separated from the consent agenda, and then David's going to have a few words to say,
Only a
and
few.
Ernie will probably go, thank you, thank you, thank you, you guys
Mhm.
are awesome. But anyone that wants to be there
Yeah,
on Tuesday night,
to take credit.
22nd.
on the
Next Tuesday night?
22nd.
It's
uh-huh.
next Tuesday night, I think, is that right?
Yes,
Mhm.
yes. So it's going to get pulled and highlighted on the agenda. So.
And maybe I can come and I'll bet I would sit in the front row. I think it's more
Yes.
important for the board members, not the attorney, to be there. Or to the extent
Yeah.
board members are showing up.
Whoever wants to come, come. Basically, that was the invitation,
Okay.
right?
Mhm.
Um,
That's it. And you can take your copy if you want it. If you
And
want
then-
it.
That's a nice copy.
It is,
Yeah,
isn't it?
that's
It's
nice.
it's really nice. It came out really well. So then let's go back to 7A. Okay, so that's 8A. Now we'll go back to 7A, right? 7A.
Mhm, But I think these want to.
Well, I'm
And you're
asking,
thinking about.
going to 6B, because do you have to leave at a quarter after?
I do have to leave it a quarter after. So are we moving 7A?
I'd like to. I'd like
Okay.
to do that after these two.
Okay, so then what we can do is informally discuss the direction the board was going with
Joanne.
Joanne. And Dee, you can do that.
Mhm.
And then we can work on your written advisory opinion, Lisa, next time. Is that?
That's fine.
And I think
mean,
if
it's here. You
people
guys
would
look
take
at
a
it.
copy of it, you
Yeah.
could read through it in 5 minutes. And
Okay.
It's very, very clean.
Okay, perfect.
It wasn't controversial.
And then just to be clear too, can we get, let's go, okay, so as far as unfinished business goes, advisory opinion 2016-3, you're still working on that, right?
That's the other one, Joanne one? Yes.
Okay, and then no substantial violation 2016-1,
Oh,
what's up with that?
which is which? Maybe we need to go into a closed session, deliberative session
Okay.
on the.
If it's going to take a deliberative session, though, I want to get to what we need to discuss about that first. I'm just wondering if I can get through 7 and get to 6, or we should just go to 6 now.
I think you can only do 7A.
Okay, all right, then let's go to
Let's move
6A
on
then.
then, yeah.
All right, okay. I just try to get through as much as possible. All right,
Well-
so 6A.
One thing that has come up is that I get just tons of little inquiries all the time, and I try to, the gray ones, like even with Lance today, the gray ones I try to get right to the board. Sometimes we don't have enough time. But also what I thought about is what if we did something on our website that had a little question and answer, and the question is, one line long, and the answer is one paragraph long. That it could be very instructional without having the formality and the time involved in these opinions. And these struck me as perhaps those, but if the board looked at them and said, "Oh no, we have lots to say," that I can convert it as an attorney into a request for opinion. So, for instance, this first one, this is just a out of the blue call. Liberty Tax wants to do tax returns for APD, all of APD, it turns out, for free, for 1 week, one location. And what do we think about that? And just so you know, in our code section, let me find it, because I'm looking for the gift sections where we attached it, the gifts. If you look to your gift section, because we attached the gift thing, it was very nicely attached. Yeah, if you look at your green, or your code, either one. Yeah, 1.155.025H. receive, so this is a safe harbor, a discount, prize, or award available to public sector employees generally, or to a large business category of public employees to which the municipal employee belongs. So this to me sounds like a discount. Is it a large enough public, large business category? You know, the first responders get all sorts of stuff, free hockey tickets, free this, free that. And I don't know why this was just slightly different. I probably would have said yes under this exception, but I thought it would be a good one to bring to the board, yay or nay, and to have it, maybe this is on the website for a paragraph. If it needs 3 paragraphs, then we convert it to an advisory opinion. I think that was the intent of this thing, and we have this all the time. Costco, you know, anybody who works for the city can get a free membership card. You know, I don't know. I mean, that's what we've been falling under this category for a long time, using this category for those types of requests. I had one personally. Could we fly an honor guard back for a veterans thing in Washington, D.C.? And I said no to that. That's using municipal resources. You're going out of Alaska. That for very many reasons, I just finally said no. That's not to a large class. That's benefiting one individual. I know it was an aging veteran, and they wanted to have the one of our EMT people go with him from the ambulance on the airplane. And I finally said, no, I think that's asking a lot. There's also liability, and but anyway, so we get various forms of this really totally regularly, and it would be helpful to me to have some guidance on this anyway. But also, if we could get 4 or 5 of these up on the website.
Anything that's like a frequently asked question type?
Oh,
thing?
constantly, yeah.
But like that would be the
Yeah.
function on the website. You know,
Yeah.
ethics frequently asked
Yeah.
questions and
Yeah.
city
You
ethics,
know,
and then it
what-
would just find.
and you know, they're pretty well trained to call me at this point.
Right.
One I did say yes to last week. I'm not sure why I gave that a yes and brought this one here. Was could the golf course give police and fire discounted golf tees or something? And I said, well, okay, there's two first responder groups there. That's a large economic employee, and it wasn't much of a discount either.
Can I ask you this question, do you, just from my own personal
Mhm.
knowledge? The safe harbor provision where it says, you know, that unless other factors of influence are present, an employee may accept the following events, and then it, you know, provides this
Mhm.
for a discount to large categories, you know,
Mhm.
large business category of public employees. What would be the circumstances in which there would be other factors of influence?
Okay, that would be like, you have this under $50 one, but if you're about to get an inspection, that's another
Yes.
safe harbor,
Yeah.
you're about to get an
timing
inspection
might
thing,
make it suspect.
giving your inspector $40 would not
Mhm.
fall under the safe harbor.
Right.
And by the way, the board recommended to the assembly that we had no gifts, cash gifts to employees, but they
Right.
wanted a small one, remember? So anyway, just open discussion, the tax, you know, doing free tax returns for first responders for 1 week.
Is there any weird appearance?
Yeah, I think I think.
Well, the first time.
Good.
No, the first time I heard you mention it, I'm like, this kind of threw my gut off. Like, really? My gut reaction was, this doesn't sound right. But I didn't do any further analysis. I was in the middle of the trial, and I didn't think another whit about it until I came here today.
That was kind of my original feeling too, but then when you showed PD,
Right.
you know, that it fits in the safe harbor. but
Right.
That's why I asked that question, David, what are other factors of
Short
influence? You know, could this be construed
Mhm.
as some type of like, hey, if I get pulled over by APT, you know, and I tell them I'm from Liberty and I gave them that free tax return, could that be,
Mhm.
create some appearance that, you know, there's a favor, it's a favor, not totally for nothing.
Yeah, I always hated when APD. In fact, I thought APD had a policy of not accepting.
They
Right,
did,
I
but they've
know.
gotten over that.
You
It's, well, I'll say, let me
Where you
say,
can.
I think that's 90% true because the chief's staff person who sent this to me, but where they were having problems is cultural things, that they'd be standing around for some terrible thing and people would want to give them food or
Mhm.
something, and it became a cultural issue, which has really opened the doors to that. Well, and here's a
Yeah.
former police person.
But what is the charge that, the normal charge for having tax it down.
Probably varies based on what your family situation is, right?
Yeah, but I mean, is it more than $50 or?
If you, yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
if
it'd be
you
a lot
run
more.
a business or something, I think it's a
Yeah.
lot more than that,
Yeah,
depending on what you,
well,
depending whether you file the 1040EZ or you file.
tell them
like
if
a
it's under
contract.
$50, they can have it done. If not,
Yeah.
if it's not, you can't.
But you can get those free ones I mean, you get the simple ones anywhere, anyway.
Oh, yeah,
Um,
that's true.
But so, Ted, you feel that it shouldn't be allowed. We pointed out to this provision, or safe
I'm
harbor.
very surprised you're even asking for it.
Mhm.
It
Well,
should-
and again, it's the new chief's, new
Yeah.
staff
Yeah.
person.
It's a
Can you
federal
show
chief.
Ted this?
Yes.
Yeah, he is a former DDA, isn't
So
he?
here it is. It's,
Yeah.
you know, the general rule is up here, and then it says, unless other factors of difference are present in employee may accept the following.
It's hot in here.
Discount price.
What's that?
It's hot in here.
It is,
Yeah.
yeah. I'm sorry, what was the consensus of the group?
We haven't reached one.
We haven't reached
Do we
one?
usually
Yeah.
permit free items as discount prices or rewards?
I understand. It's a really big discount.
It's not like, I mean, it's a 100% discount as opposed to a,
Right.
like, 25% off your taxes where you pay.
Is it
And
really a
what did we
discount?
do with
Yeah,
that
I
restaurant?
agree.
Did you discuss that
Oh,
already?
this I haven't, for
Yeah.
the newer board members. Years and years ago, the Olive Garden contacted the fire department and said they wanted to give them a free meal for, as part of their opening day celebrations.
And was it the whole fire department or
Yes.
just the,
No,
the
the
one
whole
next to that
You know,
new, because they
I-
were opening a new
I think
restaurant.
it was the whole fire department.
Okay, yeah.
And both the clerk at the staff at the time, which was Barbara Grunstein, actually the municipal clerk staffed this, and then me, both of us went, but that's before we did these safe harbors, and that's probably why I put that safe harbor in there, is because I know how often it comes up. And the board said, oh, that's fine, not a big deal. And it, you know, it was a $25, $30 meal, it wasn't extravagant, and they had no problem with it at all. Now, I did go so far as to check, make sure there weren't any inspections coming up, or
Right.
I just was so
Right.
suspicious, you know.
Yeah.
But the board said, no
Right.
problem at all, that's reasonable, and I remember thinking, okay.
Yeah.
And,
APD bothers me. I have
Doesn't
to
it?
admit.
I agree,
Yeah,
because
of
I
course,
think
but
like
because
everything
any
in the fire
entity-
department and the,
Yeah.
because I feel
That's
like
right.
most people, you're not like expecting preferential fire treatment.
Right.
Like, if
Right.
you, like,
Right, right.
dude,
We got
what are
here
you
out.
getting? Why are you not here quickly?
But there's
Whereas
discretion
there's
with
a
police
lot more
officers.
like police interaction for the average individual where you might be like getting a speeding ticket
There's
or
discretion, right?
want someone to come to your house more quickly because of something. I don't know. I agree with you.
Well,
There's a little bit more of a different
the-
gut test.
The department procedure wouldn't allow any acceptance of any gift.
but Ted, I'm
Yeah.
saying I think that's changed.
That's changed.
Well,
That's what I asked
I
you
know
while you
they're
were gone.
trying
I
to
said,
change
it,
"Did
yeah.
you-"
Yeah,
Said they-
with
they
the
said
new
gotten
chief,
over that.
he come from federal law enforcement, and they're trying to change that now. And, you know, if they want to go to the $50 aspect, that's up to them. But I don't think we should go make a special.
And that's surprising, because I thought the federal rules
I
were
would-
stricter,
I
right?
would- yeah, I
When I
agree
do
that.
stuff with federal
Right.
interior
Trying to be a good
department
guy.
people, it's like,
Yeah.
no gifts, no, nothing, right? It's the full on.
I'm
a former
surprised.
federal DOI employee, and we didn't, we
Yeah.
very
Oh, yeah.
competitive.
Yeah, that surprises me.
Very much more so.
So I will have to say, I think we all share the
Yeah.
queasiness, right? At least for APD.
But at the same time, I also don't see, I mean, the only thing I can see looking at the actual letter of the code is the question of whether or not this is technically a discount price or reward, because otherwise I don't see any actual factors of influence present. I mean, I don't know, unless there's something we don't know about whether with this, I don't see them.
Well, and how do we distinguish this from when they want to give hockey tickets to all the APD and fire departments, which they do every year? That pink thing that they have, that event, and so it's hard to distinguish, and really they do this. Different groups do it on sort of a regular basis.
I agree. I don't think we've ever really had to deal with it because APD's policy has always been
That's
no
right.
gifts, and so
Yeah.
we've never even these like the Olive Garden one. That was the fire department. It was important that it was the fire department. 'Cause I think people were like, you check to see if they had an inspection
Right.
coming up, and that was the only way we could see the
Yeah,
downstream
the only
influence.
thing
And we're
we
like,
knew.
no inspection is imminently due, and so okay, it's not a problem. APD, yeah, I think you're right. I don't know if it meets the letter of the code, like rule, the general rule of number 2, but at the same time,
Yeah.
it's not.
It could be arguably just other factors of influence present. I mean, it
Yeah.
just, it smells.
Well,
But that would,
there
that
is-
would rule out
Yeah.
everything for the police department, I think, if we're gonna apply it across the board. I mean,
So
if we're
what do
gonna
we-
say that nothing, you can't give a gift to the police department without us thinking that there may be other factors of influence present, then then it's a bigger decision, I
What
think.
do
We
we
can't say
say?
this is not okay,
Right.
but yeah, give them Olive Garden. Like,
Oh, and
So do you think there's a difference between Olive Garden and free taxes? Do you think there's a difference between that and free tickets? Is there a difference?
Amount of money,
Yeah.
really, right?
And this is a request from Liberty, right? This is not a request from either of the departments,
No,
right?
Liberty contacted APD, and then APD sent it to me and said, what do you think, Dee, can we accept it?
Oh, wow. Oh, they actually.
Yeah. No, they went, no, in fact, the vendors usually go directly to the departments. And then the departments are
Oh.
well enough trained now that then they contact me.
Wow, I'm surprised that they even. Yeah, I'm surprised, Ted, that this got through that filter.
Yeah.
Well, again, this is a chief staff person, I mean, it's.
Yeah.
Is that a misprint on number one, on your letter?
Where does it say?
It says AFD.
Yeah, it must be. It's because it's APD.
It should.
But-
You know, I
thought you said
it was
Your-
both.
your
I think I
question
said
is
that too.
AFD and AFD.
Yeah.
Well, let me look at his letter. Let's see, his letter, oh, I didn't send it
Yeah,
to you.
but,
Yeah, it's in here.
Is it there?
6B.
Number one.
6B.
Oh, yeah, it says, okay, in the letter it says free returns to
Yeah.
APD and AFD.
so that's just a mint, that should be APD.
Yes, yes,
APD and AFD.
yeah. Both,
You know,
both, it's both.
That doesn't pertain to the fire department at all.
Well, no, I'm sorry, but the letter on the bottom from the chief staff person, free tax returns to APD and AFD employees. And that's odd too, if we say yes to the fire
Wow.
department and no to the police.
Yeah.
Right.
Or
I
APD.
think we lost her. Yeah.
It's tough because I feel like we're grading between what we think the code should kind of say and
Right.
what it does say.
Right.
Well, as the writer of that code provision, I can assure you there was little intent other than this comes up all the time.
Right.
So were you were intending for it to be okay?
Yes, probably.
Yeah.
Because we just get them all the time in all different situations. And they're almost always directed at APD and AFD as first responders.
Should
They're-
should it be okay?
Well, that's what it's in. You know, Public Works
Sorry.
requested the same thing, but we turned it down, so, you know.
Yeah, so if someone said, can all the people
Any minute we're
in
going.
community development can get a free tax return, yeah, we probably would say, what?
Do we have to worry about
Just 'cause
turning
these
it
are
down
first
and then
responders.
We don't get any
But
service.
I feel like but then, I mean, would we have reason to turn it down then either? I mean, then it gives the same thing. So we could, every public works employee is entitled to free taxes. It's still a general, a discount price or award available to public sector employees generally or to a large business category of public employees because everybody who works
See, and
for-
again, all different vendors do this, like Sports Authority and, Sports Authority does it well. I think Sports Authority did it to all city employees. I mean, they want to get city, it's an advertising thing. They want to get these people in.
And I'm sure it looks nice for them
But,
too. They're like,
you know,
oh, that's doing
if-
this
if-
requirement. Community service.
Yeah, if we approve this one, then, school district employees say, well, you did it for them, why can't we get more than $50, you know? And it opens up a bucket of work. And we're trying to get less and less in here.
Well, and maybe that's a good point. Maybe we say, hey, but we mean the $50, even though the code
Right.
doesn't say that.
That's it.
We just weren't, we weren't meaning for someone to give $200 gifts to a large class of employees. That
Yeah.
just seems inappropriate. And see, that would be a good one for people to know
Okay,
about.
let me
that.
carry on. Okay. Okay, thank you. All right, I'll see you guys next month. Assuming we don't carry this over to a special meeting. All right, thank you.
I don't know. I
He
struggle
laughs.
because I feel like the code says,
I know.
like, and it's because I'm a lawyer and I'm like, well, the law says this. We can't just. Like, I feel like it says to me that whether we think it's right or not, the code says they can have it. I think.
At this moment in time, it might.
Yeah, unless
we decide.
Or
that
unless
this
they
is-
adopt internal policies that are more restrictive than the code, which I think they can.
Which it sounds like they have loosened up on.
Yeah, no,
Yeah,
before they had
yeah.
a zero.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My personal reaction, and maybe it's my federal background speaking here, is that it's a slippery slope that opens up all kinds of potential problems. That's from an appearance of impropriety standpoint. That's my 2 cents for it. But
Well,
it
and
is,
that-
nevertheless, I agree with Becky's reading of this, which is that it looks like it fits within the scope of this safe harbor as it's currently written. So I don't feel like we can just decide that it doesn't say what it says.
I wonder if your
think we
concern
can
is
revise
the
it.
other influences, right? I mean,
It just
so,
smells a little bad to me. Yeah.
so the same part says, unless other factors of influence are
Right.
present. Right?
And there
so-
isn't any other
It's
factors.
what I
Yeah,
can
what
say
would the
about
other
it.
factors be there?
Well, if you notice like in 5, you might get some guidance, right? It says, what are the public policy concerns underlying the limitations on gifts to public employees? And then things are like influence, appearance of influence,
Right.
conflict of interest. So it could be that the appearance of influence is another factor, right? So it's a factor that is present in this particular case.
How would people feel if someone said, we offer you a $100 thing to all municipal employees?
Well, my guess is it would depend on who it was, but surely some municipal employees have a more direct role in regulating industries or having decisions that would directly affect them in terms of.
Well, even this tax one, they probably don't have a lot of interaction with city services. So if these people say, we'll do up to a $100 tax return for everybody in the city, would that be problematic?
You know what's really funny about that, Dee? If you offered it more broadly, it's sort of interesting. The safe harbor is, it's okay if it's offered to this category of employees, but it has to be a large enough category. In a weird sort of way, making it to everybody makes it feel less stinky to me. Just because, it's not like you're targeting a specific group of people, kind of begging the question of, why are they giving it to these folks? There must be
Well, but I do
something
think
in
there's a
there.
first responder pro.
Yeah. I suppose the
feeling.
fact that they included AFD makes it to me more like less. If it was like just the police, that would feel a little bit more like, I don't know. But it's police and fire. So it is. I agree. It seems like they're targeting first responders for a nice service, and I think the challenge is if we just decide there's other factors of influence present, then it becomes a much broader decision. And then our opinion is basically anytime you offer the police department something that isn't the whole municipality, then we think there maybe is other factors of influence present. Because taxes seem relatively removed from police services to me. I mean, it seems like you could, with the exception of the fact that anything and there's this sort of chance for any employee of Liberty to be, to encounter the police in any number of different situations where it could be, but there's no direct link. It's not. So I have a hard time seeing what wouldn't fit in this bucket
But
if we create this.
there's almost, there's more than 400, probably close to 1,000 employees. And you can't tell me, with my experience and everything else, that if that guy, and it's only the one there at Fifth Avenue and Carlock Street, now if he gets stopped for running a red light, and he just finished doing taxes for the guy that stopped him, he ain't going to get a ticket. No way.
Well, I have to admit, these safe harbors were built in part. This wasn't one of the reasons behind it, but the environment was that APD was not a real player in this debate because of their strict internal policy.
Right.
If they're going to change that policy, I don't mind telling you, I would be in favor, or at least considering rewriting this section to address. I think law enforcement is a very, very specific. I mean, I think the public is vulnerable to law enforcement and the independence of their judgment in a very specific way.
We had a problem with the teachers. Just
Well-
think of the way they deal with the
Kids.
law enforcement,
Oh yeah, no, I mean, same sort of true with if someone was targeting the folks who issue building permits with a gift, the Anchorage home builders are here we are with a special gift for you,
That's
code
right.
reviewers.
That's
that
right.
would
Free inspection, asbestos inspection at everyone's home.
Yeah,
It's right.
just anything. I agree. Anyone who plays an enforcement role, it feels fishy. The challenge is, I think, that our decision, that it's a big decision because it's HPD here, it becomes a bigger question. Or maybe our response is just any gift to law enforcement is not.
But I like your point, Terry, because this was written in a different
Yeah,
venue.
different
All we had
environment.
really at that point was the Olive Garden and Sports Authority giving. But could
And
we
APD
make?
But it
was
was less than
denied
$50.
law.
Well, and
Is
that
that
was
better?
true in that Olive Garden. It was less than $50. So I wonder if we went back to Becky's point of maybe a discount, not a free. That up to a $50 discount would probably be acceptable at this point. Although the board is a little bit uncomfortable with,
I personally am uncomfortable with
even that.
that.
When did APD loosen up on their?
I don't know. I
It's
just
kinda last
it's
few
because
years.
I've been Well, maybe just in the last 6 months, I just don't
Yeah.
know, because all of a sudden, the fact I got that, I mean, before it was really easy.
Was this a request for advisory, or was this just a letter?
Just coming to me, yeah, and I said, no, I'll bring it to the board. But I did say okay to discounted golf tees last week.
Oh, that's great, thanks. Thanks for selling us down the river, Dee.
All of golf employees.
I just felt pressure. I had to make a decision.
That's absolutely, that's great. That explains why those guys are driving down the valley 100 miles an hour.
Well, you know,
Above the law.
I don't
Look at my
think
tees.
APD cares one way or the other. We can just say, for reasons to be discussed later on, no. I mean, we have a very strong consensus here. I'm probably the only person in the administrative convenience category, and that's fine.
No, I mean, I'm with you on the letter of this. I don't think we can turn this down. I think that the challenges that we all kind of agree that the letter of this is written in a different environment, and we have concerns about the just general ethics of people being able to give a bunch of money to police officers.
Look, you know, if I wrote such a letter to APD and said, we don't like it, we're not sure it doesn't fall within the strict rule of the code, but we really don't like it, and we're probably going to change the code over it, they're going to say no anyway.
Yeah.
They're not
Well,
going
that's
to.
what I was going to suggest.
Are we going to
a little
permit
better.
them to give it to AFD then? Or are we, I mean, then,
See, I don't like splitting that
I
here,
don't
even though
like
the
it.
enforcement, because they are first responders, and you know they do get lots of stuff for being first responders, like tickets to hockey games. You know.
Yeah, and I don't mind that. I don't mind that. The problem is, for APD, they're not just first responders. They're also the main agents who enforce the law in the city, and that's where it gets hairy to me. And I think your point, you know, I grew up with cops, you know, the same thing. They pulled one of those guys over, hey, what if I drop them in my taxes?
And it would, and that's, you know, I move that we disapprove it.
Or you could put it on hold pending me having an informal conversation with the chief.
It would be really nice to know. It sounds like they've loosened up their
And maybe
approach,
that's
but
that
it'd be
we need
nice
to, maybe
know.
we'd like to talk to the chief and find out.
Why
You know, that would be great
That
to
would
have
be
him come to the
good.
next meeting.
that would be helpful.
Meanwhile,
should
tax
I go out
season
and
will
talk to him?
pass.
I think the next meeting is past
I
tax
want to-
It
tax
is.
deadline.
Oh, no, we
Tax
have to
season
do
will pass.
something, you're right, but,
Yeah.
or yeah.
Let me go out and talk to him, and then I'll.
As a former chief, right? Aren't you, were you a chief?
Huh?
Were you a chief or just?
No, captain.
Captain.
Uniform police service. I was the highest you could go and not be politically appointed. So, but I have a card, I can still walk right in. Got a key card, so.
Yeah, because they can make their own independent decision.
Well, and that's the way it was.
And they could withdraw the request to us.
Yeah.
It seems like this is obviously not going to be our paragraph question and
I hate to
answer.
say
Yeah.
that.
I know, I hate to get
Sounds
bogged
gonna be
down
easy.
and so you can be easy on the website.
Because
So much for that.
Because I could think, because I think your point, right? Like, if you know, this is an ethics code, but it's also municipal law, right? You know, and so it does play two different roles. I mean, ethics codes should not be written or should not be interpreted the way law is interpreted, right? But law needs to be interpreted the way law is interpreted, right? You know, and so if someone were to file a notice of potential violation, I can't say I would hold a cop in violation based on the reading.
Well,
But if you
that's
say,
true.
in terms of the board also using
Advisory.
this code to offer ethical advice
Yep.
about what good
Yeah,
governance
that's true.
looks like, it's bad, right? You know, and so, you know, and so I think the informal advice at least would be, what I would envision if it, you know, if it came to it would be like an advisory opinion, which would say, yeah, technically you're allowed to do this, but this is not good, and we would strongly recommend you not move in this direction. And in fact, we might even rewrite the code, you know, the code if you were changing your internal policy. Because again, I mean, I certainly, when we wrote this section, I would have urged it to have had something specifically about APD had their internal policy not been so strict. But they were so much stricter than everyone else in the city, they were never on our radar.
Probably the assembly would have knocked that down just with our other
Yeah,
request of
that's
no
true.
money,
That's a good
no money
point.
to inspectors.
It's a good point, yeah.
So, okay, so Ted will have an informal discussion with the chief.
Okay.
Okay.
For next meeting.
And we'll bring this back before us
And
as an
if-
advisory
if-
opinion?
If we can't come to any type of agreement or whatever, I'll have him come to the next board meeting here in person.
And then we can say we can't rule on this until next board meeting, and the problem
Right.
will be passed.
Yeah.
Very
clever.
That's a Supreme Court move, right?
Yep.
Oh, you don't have standing anymore? Oh, gosh, I wish you would have ruled on that last term. Sorry.
Okay.
Okay, oh yes, I'm sorry, I'm in trouble. All right, now, let's.
Then there was another one.
Now we're gonna make some,
Okay.
now we're gonna really make
Can
some.
I read the next one for you so you don't
Yes,
have to find
please.
it?
Yes.
The next one is another one of these, whether it would be a conflict of interest for the Anchorage Fire Department to receive 2 free tickets from Alaska Airlines to raffle off in an effort to raise funds for the purchase of the antique pumper that is in our museum. This pumper costs $20,000. We don't have any direct funding for it, so firefighters are trying to raise money for it. So it came up, Alaska Airlines donates free passes all the time to lots of different things,
Right.
and so they're easy to get. And so could they do that? Now, don't think about the fact that they do have to get a gaming permit. I mean, our decision is not on the logistics. They
Right.
definitely
They
have to
can-
get a
they
gaming
can- They
permit.
can borrow some of the
Yeah.
things.
Well, and the municipalities can get them really easily and this and that. So the logistics is their problem, and I've pointed them out to the code and said, okay, I'd bring the rest of this to the ethics board.
It's not going to
So-
employee ID, it's just going to the whole department.
Yeah, the free, yeah, and then there'd be a lottery to everybody. I mean, this one struck me as yes,
Seems funny.
that it wasn't there. Certainly, there's no undue influence. Now, the tickets are free passes anywhere Alaska flies, so they're a very high value item.
But they're gonna raffle them off. And AFD would get those tickets and they could raise money from people who wanna put their name in the hopper for those tickets.
And the
That
benefit
seems-
is they're going to get this antique pumper.
Who's raffling them off?
AFD is
AFD.
proposing that they would be doing it.
Yeah, but through,
I
the, International Firefighters Association.
I don't think the unions, in fact, that was one of the things, if they couldn't, then could the union do it? And I said, let's just keep it at you for now. So
Mhm.
not through AFF. Because they're a private corporation, and of course they could do it. The union is incorporated in a separate entity. So yes, I mean, there is an alternative as well.
I don't see why they couldn't take them though. I mean, this isn't benefiting an individual, right? I mean, and even the end benefit isn't any individual. It's not like they're raffling them off in order to raise money for all the firemen to get something,
Yeah.
money to pay for their tax return.
It's
They're
nice, the
in the
stingy
end,
board of ethics.
Wait a
in the end,
minute.
they're going to end up with an antique pumper, right? Which is sort of equal and minimal benefit to all firemen in the city.
That is clearly public purpose.
Well, I was gonna say, it's a
Clearly
Yeah,
public
well, the thing is,
purpose.
it's a public purpose. It's not like there's no private purpose here. Not in the end.
No
it's not
private
like-
interest.
They're not going to like joyride around town in the pumper.
They might put it in a parade or something.
Yeah, that's true, but that seems like public purpose too. So it seems like it's all public purpose to me here in this one.
So answer yes.
Yeah, unless so is there any downstream effect from AFD to Alaska Airlines? Does AFD have a role in inspecting their facilities at the airport or any building that is there that so that my concern is just like the Olive Garden type concerns, is there some sort of relatively soon sort of downstream effect for Alaska Airlines, in which because AFD does some law enforcement in terms of like inspection and things like that. If like Olive Garden, it's absent that, I'm 100% with you guys.
Yeah, I could verify that.
Well, most of their facilities are out at the airport, and that's a state.
That's state and federal, right?
Yeah,
That's
state.
what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
We don't have any.
Yeah.
I could verify that. And apparently, Alaska Airlines has a person. This all he does is give out free passes everywhere.
Yeah.
It's a big part of their program.
Where's the free passes for the Board of Ethics? No, just
We're
kidding.
having a
Just
raffle.
kidding. It's not allowed.
To purchase an antique ethical.
So-
That's an original copy of Plato's Republic.
Okay, so
I don't foresee a problem with this.
I don't either, honestly.
Okay.
But
Very good. What time is it?
1:30.
is this worthy
No, it's
of
only
going on a
12:30.
question and answer? Here, a lot of city thinks that gifts are just outlawed, sort of. And that's why I get so many of these questions. And should we educate them? There are safe harbors. Although this doesn't fall in any kind of safe harbor, it's just so maybe this isn't helpful because on the whole, it's sort of a different situation. So I'll take that back. I'm not sure.
It might be a neat thing to put up on the, I don't know if we could do it in a few paragraphs, but it would indicate, like the way we think about this kind of stuff, because there are other employees who are involved in like rezoning stuff, and that maybe they too there's enough of a downstream effect that it would at least create the appearance of influence or the appearance of impropriety. And it might be nice if, when all the dust settles, to actually have these two cases, maybe like, why not APD, but why AFD in this case, and say, well, look, what's the difference? The difference is at least the perceived influence given the possible downstream effects for the gift giver.
Now, can we buy the tickets? Can we buy a ticket on that?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
I'm making an official
Oh, please don't. Please don't.
ruling.
I'm trying to keep the board out of that.
No, I don't gamble at all. So
Are you going to write these paragraphs, Steve?
Well, I'm not sure, because it seems to me that the APD one is much bigger than one paragraph. So probably
Oh, that's in advisory, okay.
Yeah, that if we're going to do anything, we would turn that into a request for advisory, or not do anything and just have the informal conversation.
Yeah, that seems like a much bigger, same where there's a moving piece too of what the police department's internal policy is and maybe and what we might want to do with the code based on what that is.
And again, I do like Terry's point that when we did these safe harbors, it was at a time when APD wasn't doing this. It was just really, it came up AFD. It kept AFD. Nice guys. Yes. And then this, at least in answer to your other question, this second one, I guess I could write a two-liner that. Although it's sort of interesting, I had told them, obviously you have to go up the chain in municipal management. You're going to do a raffle, and but apparently that's been done.
Well, no, that's through the state. They have to get
Oh, no,
state
but
permit.
just that our city agrees with them doing this in general. Yeah, they're going to get the state.
They have to get the permit through the state, which they can get any nonprofit will let them use their number, their permit number.
Since this is something new, do we need to make a motion on how we answer these questions?
We could. It could clarify, I guess. But just that a motion that the first one, the APD tax, liberty tax, is probably not well suited for a short question and answer on the website.
Okay, that would be the
It is
conversion.
so moved.
Okay.
What if he has to say that?
Say that. Ted said.
I'll say it, so moved.
Okay.
Second?
Okay. And the
Well, I was
second-
asking for a second. Ted, are you willing to second that? I really shouldn't be
Oh, that's right.
doing that.
No problem.
Second. Okay, so all those in favor of doing that? So the motion is going to be that it's not suitable to use the Liberty Tax case as a frequently asked question bit on the website. Okay, good. How about, do we have a motion to use the fire department one though? The tickets for the fire department as a.
That'd be our next one. We don't have to resolve this motion first.
Oh, I thought we just voted. Oh,
Oh,
sorry. So all those in favor of that?
Yes.
Well,
Yes.
I wanted to make a statement because.
I'm sorry, Ted. Discussion period has ended.
It's a heavy
Call
chair.
question.
Give it the gavel. It just gets out
That's
of
right.
control.
That's right. Friendly David
Lots
isn't
of
here
work.
anymore. The philosopher king is in charge now.
If we don't do it like we said, we're gonna have to consider rewriting, just like we did for the school district, rewriting something for the police department, as
Yeah.
far as ethics go.
But I remember for that kind of stuff. Let's see how your conversation before we get into like the substance of that one. I think we're just going to decide now not to use that as a frequently asked question bit on the web.
Right.
And then the substance of it, I think, will wade into pending your discussion with the chief, and we'll just see where they're going. If they are going to change their internal policy in a significant way, then
We're
we'll
gonna have to
figure out what-
rewrite that, yeah.
There are a lot of things we can tweak here. To achieve our goal, we can tweak it a number of different ways if we were to achieve what we're talking about.
Okay, so all those in favor of that. So
Yes.
okay,
Aye.
good. Okay, and then we probably need a motion for the next one. Then was the prevailing opinion that it is okay to use the fire department tickets one as a quick frequently asked question bit on the
Well,
web?
that it's okay the fire department use tickets for a raffle.
Wait a second.
Yeah, I'll second that. I mean, I think if this is, in your discussion, Dave, this is a question that comes up frequently
I was going to say, I
enough.
don't think it's very
This
helpful.
one has some
Yeah.
weird
Oh, this
like,
one's not bad.
wiggles to it because it's like donation to the department and then there's the antique pumper
Yeah,
at the end.
yeah, I
like,
don't know.
It's not one of those really common issues.
Yeah, if it's common, then sure, put it on the website. but
Yeah,
it's-
I don't think it is
it
common.
seems like it might not
My
be the
recommendation would be
helpful
not to.
guidepost.
Even though
Okay.
I gave it to you for that purpose.
If
but-
you have it in a copy
For
of your
this
mind.
time and that it is, with, had this been 2-3 years ago, they could have gone to Juneau and got a grant
Yeah.
to purchase that in outright without going through all this. But now there is absolutely no money coming out
Yeah.
of Juneau, and so.
Bake
But they
sales.
still want to go forward
Bake
with it, so
sales.
that's the best way to do it.
No, that makes sense. Maybe there's a broader question that's gonna come up more often, is donations to departments.
So the motion I wanted was just how you were answering the question. And you're answering that it's okay to go
Oh,
ahead
that
and.
one, you want us to know how we're gonna answer the
and,
question. so-
You've already said you don't want it on the website, but it was just
Yes,
like, this
okay.
is how we're
I think
answering.
that's actually what Ted's motion.
Yeah,
said.
and
Yes, it's
Ted
okay,
did,
and I second
Ted
that
did,
motion.
yeah, he did state
I
it that way,
I
so.
took myself for it,
Yeah,
request
okay.
discussion of website flexibility.
Excellent. Okay, so all those in favor of telling them it's okay to acquire these tickets and use it to secure the public good ancient pumper. That would be
Antique.
antique. Okay.
Okay.
Ted, any objections? All right, very good. Moving on, is there anything else that we have to do today? Or is,
Well, could you repeat what's happening with 7A with your advisory opinion?
Okay.
Is it going to come back to the next meeting then?
Well, can we
Oh,
move
yeah.
to extend for 10 minutes, because
I've got 10 minutes. If people, how are people?
Yeah, that's fine. I
making
have
it?
a 2:30 in my office, so I need to go run this one to read at 10.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Ted, how about you? Got
Okay.
10 minutes in you?
I got.
And we could even go off
I
record
took
to
care of
read
my
it for
meeting
10
already,
minutes
so.
and then.
And I can
Okay.
give you guys the preview of what you're gonna read, so that you can
Okay,
just
okay.
let me give you the.
Is this in our
7A.
packet? Is this 7? Everyone, take a look at
So,
7A.
so you guys, what I really tried to do, I really tried to track the conversation that we had last time, which is I first looked at the provision that deals with contemporaneous service and employment. And then, basically concluded we're really not concerned about her current employment and a conflict with her consulting duties. But then I looked to that other provision that dealt with restrictions on employment after leaving municipal service, because I think our conclusion as a group was that we thought that the spirit of that provision should apply. And then I got into the separate section about the prohibitions on disclosure and use of confidential information. So that's really kind of the outline of the steps.
What are we asking for? You approve this?
Yes, or any edits.
I move that. We approve that. Sounds good to me.
You were a fast reader.
Yes.
Well, he got in here
I read it
early and
before.
read.
I
Yeah.
got it
Good
before
job.
meeting.
Yeah, I think it's great.
Yeah.
This is really well written. Thank you, Vincent.
Oh, you're welcome.
Yeah, I have to say I'm happy with it as well.
Yeah, I am as well.
Did you guys have enough time to read it?
Yep.
Did you?
Yep.
That may
You
be a
misspelled the
first.
word, but I'm not going to break
Oh,
it.
no. I think that's the first time for Terry, by the way.
So you asked him to read it so quickly, the poor guy.
It's a trick, right?
So Terry, I tried to get your spirit in there. It was
I
the
saw
spirit,
that. Thank
yeah.
you. I appreciate that.
we had, Becky, toward the end of the last meeting, had raised the issue about confidential information, but we had not at that time realized or really found in the code the provision that said thou shalt not use that.
Yeah, well, that's
person. But
pretty good.
it's there, so I
Yeah.
thought, okay, I don't have to stretch that at all. That's right in the code.
No, I think you touched on all the things that we highlighted, which were these, again, these bolded sections of the
Yeah.
125, 125C, and the not participating directly, initiatives where she was directly and personally involved while an employee, and then also not reusing or relying or disclosing or using for her own benefit
Right.
confidential information she's received at the place of employment. So, good. I think it's great.
Okay, do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second? Discussion? All right, all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no? All right, that one passes. Do we have anything else that we think we can do quickly, or are we now getting into?
We can continue everything else, and if you guys want to give us a quick blurb, you said you had some news about the code rewrite.
Well, we spent some time on this and scheduled a number of meetings, and I'm not so sure, I think we're not so sure that just using the state model is going to be all that much shorter. When I say that, they actually really do divide theirs between, I think it was employees and board members and elected officials. So 10 pages each, now we're up to 20 versus 30 or 40 here. And I think as Lisa's worked more with the code too, there are a few sections that are particularly problematic, and maybe we shouldn't be doing a code rewrite, but like for instance, the political activities section is the worst. And if that section got cleaned up, probably the gift rewrites in the elected officials, and we've never rewritten those sections. There might be 5 sections that can be rewritten pretty easily. Now, if we take that approach, we go, and I guess it should be up to Lisa and I to sort of recommend that at some point, we say, okay, let's take out some stuff. There might be some take out stuff in addition, but it's really the political activity thing that created all the problems, so much of the problems that we've had in the last couple of years. So anyway, we just weren't as convinced that we could just go to the state code because it turned out to be 2 entirely separate provisions.
What do you think? Do you think one thing that we could do is we could identify like 5 or 6 sections that we would like to have rewritten, and then farm them out to various people on the board as homework, and say like, look, your task for the next meeting is go through, simplify this, make it more streamlined, find inconsistencies, work on it, and then have some drafts to start working on at our next meeting.
Well,
How's
I'd
that?
like the board to, for me, it'd be helpful if the board looked at certain provisions, unfortunately it's more for the experienced members probably, but said, these are the provisions, like your investigative stuff, that really are problematic. I'm not sure handing them out, other than that you've put a substantial start on that, is very helpful for board members to have to do very much drafting outside of these meetings.
Mhm.
That you could assign them to us, and then we could look at, for instance, the state model with respect to those
okay.
sections. But anyway, I'm becoming less convinced that it's so easy to just borrow the state 10-page ethics code, because it turned out much longer than I thought.
Well, I don't want to dump more work on you guys, but do you want to start doing that then? Do you want to
Mhm.
start maybe with the political activity section, the one that's been, that seems like that's like a one that's a real headache.
Can I ask you guys, and you guys have been here a lot longer than I have. My question for you guys is, were you feeling that just having the code broken down into these 3 separate sections for municipal employees and for folks who are appointed to boards and then for elected officials, was that giving you angst because there were inconsistencies between those sections in terms of certain things that you thought should have been consistent throughout, or what was kind of dry? There's part of me that actually doesn't mind the broken down structure. Now, I don't know if there are inconsistencies in, say, for example, gifts and how they're treated for municipal employees versus elected officials, or if that's the angst that you guys had, or what was it? Is it just too long, or what was sort of driving the desire for the...
There's a number of features. One is the breaking up into 3, because it creates 3 different standards. So for
3
anyone
rules.
it's like go through 3 sections of the code, then you do sort of have this problem that you've got board and commission members who are elected to the board and commission, and so there's been chronic confusion, and at least for those people, like, well, which part of the code applies to me? Secondly, the code is just badly written in a lot of areas. Well, not badly written, but like as you start to actually try to implement it, we've just found so many bugs over the time. And I think part of what happened, this is at least my reconstruction of sort of like the history of the code, is that you know, the movement in codes nowadays is to make them more straightforward, fairly straight, where the spirit and the, you know, where sort of like the sort of like the advice that a board like this would give would become really important. That, you know, that the code's relatively short, it's mostly principles, not rules, and then the details get spoiled in sort of by the advice of your board and your ethics officers and things like that. And my understanding is that this rewrite started out that way, and then basically at a certain point, the lawyers got a hold of it, right? You know, that the assembly lawyers got a hold of it, and then it became, well, we don't want to be held, you know, all of the legal profession's going through this too, right? The worry of like, oh, whoa, if it's just all these broad principles, we're going to get nailed for everything. So we want to start building in more exceptions, carving out more safe harbors, more niches in this, and to the point where you now sort of have this code that it's too long and too complex, to be honest. And I think the political activity one's just like a really great example where you almost have these things like trying to diagram out how, you know, what duties a political official actually has when it comes to, you know, using municipal resources for political activity. Like we found this backdoor effect where they're exempt, except in the employee section, suddenly they're not exempt anymore, right? If they knowingly are allowing employees to do it. And so, you know, my certainly, you know, I would personally like to see it. I think everyone wants to see a code that's easier to understand and shorter, more straightforward. And again, I think that's the trend in codes anyway. I think that is the better way to go, to make it more shorter, more principled. And then, yeah, I mean, then you do wind up having to rely more on your ethics officers and the board to act in an independent and impartial way and trying to get. I think we've been relatively, I mean, certainly this board, I think, has been really good about being non-political. I think, you know, and we've had some political hot potatoes, and I think we handled them in a really responsible way. But that's, you can see, but that's the sort of competing interest, right? You know, it's like you write a code sort of like for what you want an ethics code to do, or you want to write a code in a fairly defensive way where you're building in all these sort of legal exceptions.
It's very interesting when you think about the legal code of ethics. I actually kind of like the legal code of ethics because it has more kind of it has more aspirational stuff. I mean, it has rules, but then they have, what is it that they have all the examples? I mean, when you're studying for your ethics exam, you go and you look at all the examples
Well,
of
there's
how
like
the
a
code has been
commentary
interpreted.
section
Well,
on
that's-
each
Yes,
section
the
of the Board of
Right.
Ethics.
Which is much longer than
And that's
really
that's the standard, right? Like the nursing code of ethics is basically 7 principles that fits on one page, but then the commentary is much longer, right? You know, kind of like unpacks, here's what the different principles mean.
Here's how it's been applied and here's how it's intended
I
to be
would say,
construed.
practically speaking, I don't know if this is the case with this part of the code. From my experience working with like the assembly and other parts of the code, or like changes to the things, I think from the way they operate, I could see the merit of trying to tie everything together because they do so much that I feel like sometimes they're like, oh, code revision to this section, like, okay, sounds good. And then, but it may change the language of like the wording about elected officials, but not the wording in the parallel
The unintended
provision.
consequences of changing that little section.
Yeah, and then you end up with these mutually inconsistent pieces of language. That's the only benefit I can see, just because I know that, like other contexts, I've ended up in that place with legislation that's come through the Anchorage Assembly where it's like, wait a minute, there wasn't time to think about cross-references to Title 23.
So you're both suggesting sort of go to the newer code approach, even if it's not as short as we had hoped. I did hope about 10 pages, and I think it'll be more like 20, and that it would be simpler. The assembly routine dislikes this ethics code because it's impossible to find things.
Yeah.
You know, when people ask me questions as an ethics officer, it shouldn't take me 20 to 40 minutes to figure them out.
Especially
Especially
whether you're having lunch over.
only if it's free. So
No, I mean,
But under $50 and available to a broad class of municipal employees.
I always wonder, you guys, if there's these broad categories, there's conflicts of interest, there's gifts, there's political campaigning, but I wonder, and this demonstrates my inexperience with this code, is there internal inconsistency in a way that was, sometimes it's intentional distinctions because there are different rules for different
I
players.
don't think so between the
Okay.
categories,
Okay.
but it's very difficult for someone to understand why the elected officials'
Yes.
gifts are so much different
Right.
than this.
Why don't they look the same?
Yeah, why don't they look the same?
Or why don't they look reasonably the same with some obvious distinctions that are very easy to parse out so that you can understand, oh, these are
Yeah.
totally the same except these 3 areas. I got it.
Yeah, I mean, in some cases, there are
It's
some
very-
different, municipal employees are employees of the city,
Right.
whereas, assembly members are expected to have their own
Right.
jobs and careers.
Right.
But the mayor, while an elected official, this is his main, and so that's
There
why
are
you start getting
distinctions.
into these
Right.
wrinkles. I don't mind if I have my druthers, read like the first 4 pages of this code, right? The aspirational preamble and then the prohibited conduct. In my mind, you could stop the code right there and you'd have a pretty good code. But then you'd be relying a lot on the interpretation of those principles by this board, and
He's
You see,
maybe
you know,
even
it's-
ring more off the road.
Yeah. What was interesting is I looked at the IMLA suggested model code by the International Association of Municipal Attorneys. And it started out sort of sounding clear, but what they ended up, they got totally bogged down in the rules. Oh my gosh. And they'd have like a whole paragraph of 15 different clauses because, oh yeah, we forgot about that. And so every paragraph was impossible to read. It covered an entire topic in every paragraph. It was so, about those attorneys on that one.
Is there a role for something like what we were talking about in terms of the commentary on like the judicial ethics rules and the legal ethics rules? Like, because I feel like I was just thinking about the comparison with the legal. When you have an actual ethical issue as an attorney, you look at the rule, and then you say, okay, I don't know, and you look at the commentary, and then if you don't know, then you call. I don't actually know who Steve Van Gore's replacement is.
John Woodman.
Yeah, you call him and say, hey, did Woodman replace?
It's a woman.
Steve Van Gore?
It's a woman, yeah.
Well, Woodman's the
Yeah.
guy in the state. He's the state.
He's the
ethics.
complex counsel.
Yeah, it's
But
all-
if you're a personal attorney, you could still call Steve Van Gore on the phone. You're like, Steve, having this issue,
Yeah.
and then he would like dispense the wisdom of the
the ages.
where
Say
your
it.
role is doing this. But just thinking about whether there's a role to make the code briefer, and I don't know if that would be a regulation. We don't have regulations.
We
in
do.
Title I, do we?
Well, no, we don't have one, but we could.
We could. So if we wanted to do that, but that doesn't necessarily make it any shorter. Just
Or you can have stuff like commentary could be maybe just something that's available on the ethics code or
yeah. It would
on the
just be-
website or
Like
it'd be
annotations.
unofficial.
Yeah,
It's like an
annotations.
annotated statute.
Yeah.
It's like,
Well,
what
you know,
did
but
the
that's,
case
some of
was?
that's helpful.
And maybe that's what we were suggesting in terms of the frequently asked questions thing too. Is could we
It
make
is
the
kind of
code
like
shorter,
that.
and then
Yes.
could we have some sort of standard advice?
Speaking of which,
That's-
one of the things we need to go back and put on our frequently asked questions section, for which we have no questions yet, is the one about Amy Dembowski, whether she could use her title in a
Oh, that's a great one.
robocall, because that comes up all the time. Can the mayor go here and use his title? I mean, I get calls because it's election time, and I would love to see that as a frequently asked question because that was an important ruling. And everybody's has all these fundraising brochures are going out, and the officials don't even know their name is being used, and it says mayor, and it's like can we do this? And that is a helpful opinion because it informs quite a bit.
Right.
So I don't know if you could do that one because right now what we have is the minutes, and I looked for that and I said, well, this is unhelpful.
We didn't write an opinion for that.
Because that would be helpful.
Not for that one. We decided to just take the minutes discussion and put it on the website.
Okay.
And that looks weird and it's not particularly
Yeah, I
helpful.
think it's something else.
That might be a good starter one. Because
And that
it's such
discussion's
a-
up on the website now?
Mhm.
I'll check it
You'll
out.
keep coming up
I'll
on
do that.
the, I mean, you'll
Oh, I
just.
will. Well, now that I know I
you
can
put a
bring
list of
small little
questions.
ones, hopefully. I'm going to have to pick the small ones that I rule on and bring them to the board.
Well, so that being said, so how would you like to proceed then? I mean, do you want sort of to be able to
It sounds
start?
like maybe we're going to try to continue looking for the different code. It just may not be as short as we had hoped. The state one is much clearer than our code. It's better written, and so maybe we just go there. Because you're right. I mean, that there'd be about probably in terms of time, rewriting would take. There's at least 5 sections that really need to be rewritten. It'd take a lot of time, as Becky suggested, and you have to worry about the other code sections. So maybe we just go back to our state.
It's just a big project. It's it's finding the time to do it. It's always the challenge.
I heard my municipal employee didn't have any.
Nothing to do with it. Nothing. That's right. Contemplating
The
the
fleecing of
rules.
Alaska.
Yes.
All right.
Okay.
Anything else? Anything else that we can do? You probably.
I should run it.
You should run
to
it.
go to my
Oh, okay.
meeting back at the office.
Very good. Okay. So with that said, do we have a motion to adjourn?
Oh, good job.
All right. All right. So moved.
Yeah.